What is happening, everybody? Good morning. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Jamal Thomas Show. And yes, as I always point out, thank you for being here. You could be pretty much anywhere and you find yourself under this voice. I'm looking chunky today. That's okay. That's okay. I'll be chunky today. I hope you guys are doing well this morning. 200th episode. 200th episode. 200th episode. I will tell you, one of the things on the radio station, we went through, I think, 8 different hosts, and they started blaming me, saying that I was somehow responsible for us not being able to keep our hosts. Now, there were various reasons why we couldn't do it. I was not responsible for any of it. I am a damn good co-host. But at a certain point, I just wanted to run the show on my own. And I strongly suspect that part of the issue was they thought I might get sick, ill, anything could happen. Well, damn it, 200th show. 200th show. And we have a damn good one for you today. I want to start off with my man, Andrii Telizhenko. Andrii was nice enough to join me this morning, and I deeply appreciate you joining me this morning. I'm going to do a monologue at 7:30, but I wanted to get you in first. Andrii Telizhenko is a Ukrainian whistleblower and former diplomat. How you doing, my man? You doing okay?
Good morning, Jamal. I'm doing perfectly fine. Thank you for having me on. It was good that we could connect to each other and find the time together to get this thing done because it's an important thing to do. You want to discuss today. So
yes, it is. So I am making an argument, and I will make the argument in more detail at 7:30. But I get the sense that the United States is tired of playing with its toys, or its toy, and is now trying to flush Zelensky down the toilet. This is taking place over Ukraine. Now, these protests have started, weirdly enough, as a result of Zelensky going after 2 organizations. What is it? NABU and SAPO. Effectively, these are supposed to be corruption organizations. I think it's NABU. Is it NABU or NABO?
NABU.
Okay, good. NABU. These are corruption organizations, and I'm putting in quotes. Let's be honest, they were mostly run by the U.S. Embassy or by Europeans. They weren't necessarily under Ukrainian control.
Directly by the FBI and Department of Justice, if you can
exactly.
More complete.
Thank you. That's more accurate. That's more specific. And they effectively came after the coup in 2014 when Yanukovych was overthrown in Ukraine. This was supposed to be the gateway to joining the European Union. And as I point out, these were not under the control of Ukraine itself. Now, Zelensky, as it is being put, started to get investigated, him and his circle of people, by these organizations, in which case Zelensky moved rapidly to get a bill, which he signed into law, to put these organizations under his office. I think they call it Office of the Protector General or Inspector General, but basically they're under Zelensky's office. And all of a sudden, people flipped out. People flipped out. Now, I don't know how many people even know these organizations exist. I have a hard time believing that a country that is corrupt, as Ukraine is under this government, all of a sudden freak out and come out. They're trashing Zelensky. They're trashing Yermak. Give me your take on this. What are your thoughts? I mean, you're a Ukrainian whistleblower. You point out the corruption, especially between the Biden administration and Ukraine, especially with the money that is going to Ukraine. And now people are losing their minds, supposedly, because I'm very skeptical that this started organically, even though there may be a lot of people who ended up there organically after the AstroTurf. Give me your thoughts on this.
Not only I was part of the whistleblower, but I was advisor to the Prosecutor General of Ukraine, knowing the inside what's happening with NABU and how it was formed. It was formed on my eyes, basically ramped and through the Ukrainian throat to have these organizations formed. But at that time, that was the idea. We will not give you a tranche of money if you don't form NABU and SAPO for Ukraine. So that was the result. George Kent, Ambassador Pyatt, they were involved in that, and Vice President Biden. They fully took control of these organizations and used them for their own purposes, directed to coordinate with the Department of Justice and the FBI, and to work against Ukraine, the country itself. Basically, they were not sovereign organizations. They're working not for Ukraine. They're working for Washington, D.C., the deep state, etc. And I believe today the result is that Yermak Zelensky thought while Trump is fighting the deep state, he can use this opportunity to go against and destroy any opposition because these organizations within the government were opposition to Zelensky. They were supporting Poroshenko, Klitschko, that crowd. And Zelensky thought, why not remove them and use this opportunity? The pluses should override the minuses in this situation. So I think somebody gave them a bad idea of this. Somebody said, "Oh, the West is going to close their eyes on this. They'll continue, etc., etc. Just do it, and you'll benefit from this. You'll stay in power longer." That's what Zelensky did, to stay in power longer. These organizations not only were responsible for investigating Zelensky's surrounding, but also they were feeding information to the opposition, and basically opposition within the government bodies, which had the little own armies, not only with government officials but also like SWAT teams, etc., which were were very well financed by the outside. That's one thing. This is about Naboo, Sapo, just in the short term. About these protests, we had 3 years of basically the dictatorship, terrorism by Zelensky. The borders are closed. People are dying on the border, being blown up on mines, shot by the border officers, drowned in lakes because they cannot cross those river lakes, mountain lakes, and rivers. Nothing happened. You have the busification, the throwing of people like dogs to the front lines. Your loved ones, fathers, sons, and brothers are caught on the street, like basically as like dogs and thrown to the bus and then sent to the front lines. Nothing happened. Today, you have this Naboo anti-corruption body, which Ukraine is the most corrupt country, and you have a protest against going against the anti-corruption bodies by who? Klitschko is there. Everybody who's on that protest, I saw the photos, are all those pro-Soros activists. I'm against those anti-corruption bodies. I am for that should be destroyed, but I'm also against Zelensky because Zelensky basically destroyed my country, Ukraine. And at the same time, I'm for any protests that will overthrow Zelensky. They are spiders. These political parties from within Ukraine, they're going to destroy each other from within. Let them do that. And I'm for that. But the protests today, as I said, throughout the 3 years of dictatorship, illegal presidency, killing of people, throwing people to the front lines against their own will, nobody came out on the street. Even if some of the mothers of the dead soldiers who came out on the street, they were ramped up fast within 20 minutes. They didn't have a chance to stand on the street. Here, you have a well-organized protest. It's a shakeup from the West. The West is shaking Ukraine. This might not lead directly to the Zelensky's destruction today or tomorrow, but this in Ukraine happens 1 or 2, 3 big protests, and then you have the fourth one, which goes the coup, hits it hard, and that's how it works. It goes by the book, but this is a different situation in Ukraine today because so is Zelensky, so are these other political figures within Ukraine are well coordinated from outside, and we will see who wins. Today, basically, Soros and pro deep state Washington figures are on streets against Zelensky, and Zelensky is basically backed up by London, sitting in his office today. So this is what the reality is.
Yeah, I was fascinated by this because there are a few things. You get Seymour Hersh coming out with an article saying it's the end of Zelensky. You get coordinated other articles that came out going after Zelensky. And then you get Zelensky trying to solidify his power base in Ukraine, in Kiev. And then you get him raiding offices, like dozens of offices of Naboo and Sapo were effectively raided. And Zelensky was using the argument that Russia had infiltrated these corruption offices, and he had to go after the corruption offices in order to stop Russia's influence in these organizations. And it's like, hey, but it's super coincidental that they started investigating you and you started going after the organizations after they started investigating you and the people around you. And then, as I point out of the blue, as you made the point of saying, all of these people were dying, all of these people were getting thrown to the fronts. You had press gangs going after people left and right. Nothing. Quiet as a church mouse. At the moment Zelensky goes after Western let's say, power brokers. Protests spring up out of nowhere. Now, what's interesting to me is the coordinated articles that were all also coming out. I mean, for God's sake, you got article after article coming out going after Zelensky at the exact same time that the protests started to take place. So you get this one, editorial, Zelensky just betrayed Ukraine's democracy. You get another one, we know how to stand up for our rights, Ukrainian protest law threatening anti-corruption institution. You get this one from Politico. Meaning there are so many of these articles that have come out. Oh, I guess you couldn't see that one. You get this one from Politico. Anger bills as Ukraine Zelensky law targeting corruption watchdog. I don't know if I showed this one last time. We know how to stand up for our rights. Ukrainians protest laws threatening anti-corruption institution. I mean, you get another one saying Zelensky has betrayed Ukraine. You get various actors out of Ukraine going after Zelensky. It's rather amazing. And it seems super coincidental that all of it is happening at the exact same time. I want to show you a clip from Scott Ritter. I don't often say Ritter is right, but I want to get your take on whether you think Ritter is right here. This is him on Galloway. Listen to what he says. Because, by the way, I agree with you. I think this is the beginning of the end. I think this is them agitating, and the catch becomes how far does this agitation go?
Or he can die. Zelensky's on his way out. And again, I don't mean to be too harsh here, but he can either leave the old-fashioned way, which is on an airplane with a suitcase full of money going to one of the many mansions that he's bought with American taxpayer funds over the course of the past decade, or he can die on a cold slab, shirtless, with a bullet hole in his head. That's just the way it's going to be.
Give me your take on that. Is that the way you think this plays out?
Yes, I believe, but I think it's more leaning right now to the second part. I think he might die without not even getting out of Ukraine. He knows too much. People like that, that's why he's staying in power. He understands somewhere deep inside him that if he leaves Ukraine, like you have different cases around the globe that people don't like that don't live too long. But Berezovsky, for example, hung himself in the bath, and now he doesn't even have a gravestone 12 years later after he killed himself. So a billionaire from Russia, Berezovsky, a billionaire from Russia who was against Russia, supported by the West, trying to do the coup in Ukraine in 2004, trying to do a coup in Russia, blah blah blah. That guy, the oligarch from Russia, who basically not Russia killed him, but the West killed him. He knew too much. The same thing with Zelensky. He might go and live there for a while, but he doesn't have a standing chance to live until he's basically 100 years old, is dying in his deathbed with grandchildren around him. No, so he has a bigger chance getting shot leaving Ukraine because nobody will let him leave with that kind of money on his hands.
Wait, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. You say he knows too much. What do you mean he knows too much?
The war started. How the war started, and how he agreed to start this war against the Russian Federation. How he basically was bought off by the MI6 to lure Ukraine into this war against the Russian Federation, knowing that they're not going to win on a battlefield, a nuclear nation like the Russian Federation. That's the reality. They were preparing for this war, and we talked about this on your show a couple of times, 2 years before the war even started. I was talking to people in the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. I was talking to former military officials who would come to Ukraine, meeting with the radicals in restaurants around Kiev. And they were preparing for something that will happen in Russia after some event. And this was 2 years before this. So they knew, Zelensky knew what he was up to. Zelensky sold off to Ukraine, and Scott Ritter also talked about this, how Zelensky sold out to the MI6. And I talked about this even before that. So this is what the reality is. He knows too much, so they will not let him out. And Zelensky understands it. Yermak understands it. So that's where they're trying to engage into building a structure that the West will not be able to topple them. They believe having the power they have right now, having all the oligarchs in place, having the whole system working for them, But they don't understand the reality is that they are there because of the West, because of the Western support. As soon as the Western support leaves Ukraine, if it ever does, if the West will say the Naboo are more important than the war, etc., even though I don't believe so, but this they will not do it directly this way. They will try to manage it in a couple of protests and then hit Zelensky hard for him to leave at the end of the year. But if they do stop the financing, Ukraine will topple within a month because there's no payments to the government officials because we have no salaries. Everything's going from the outside. There's no economy in Ukraine. Ukraine is done. As a country, doesn't exist. It exists only on paper. But if you take away every financial support from the outside of Ukraine, it's going to die really fast. So this data, Zelensky does not. He believes in his own lies that he is powerful and much more powerful than Putin at the same time. So this is how bad the situation is, how deep Ukraine is in trouble, and the Ukrainians are because they let themselves into. They didn't believe that this. They believed the propaganda of the outside of Ukraine. Now they're facing the consequences. What will happen to Ukraine? I think the military will take over at one point. They will not let the politicians to take power, and I don't know if it's going to be Zelensky or somebody else, but it will also not last long because the military doesn't have the capability of micromanaging and managing the situation for a country for too far. Ukraine is not. It's a dictatorship as a terrorist state. It's a fallen state, but the military doesn't do a good job overriding a country. So, like Ukraine. So we'll see what's going to happen. But Zelensky's days are outnumbered, and then they are going far, far, far from what he expected to stay in power.
You say you think the military may even take over at a certain point. You mean like if
Yes.
the casualties get too high, their inability to stop the Russians that they've made?
Yes, I think they will not let the politicians. There's a game being played out in Ukraine, a couple of cards. That I said, there's a military intelligence who are against Zelensky. They're ready to back up people like from the Poroshenko side, but at the same time, they're not ready to back up Poroshenko himself.
Yeah.
That's on one point. So they believe that they will. What they want to do is they want to continue this war. They believe they understand they cannot win it, but they need to understand that they died for this country. They were put into this situation. They were given power, not just regular soldiers. I'm saying the management of the military. There's cases within the military intelligence that were coordinated from the Baltic states in Western Ukraine, like the Khmelnytsky, Ternopil military intelligence offices that are ready to go into Kiev any day. They were ready a year ago to do that. So they're waiting for their time. So something is happening. So it's being coordinated from not only from within Ukraine, but from the outside. Again, Ukraine now not being a sovereign state, every movement of protests or every coordinated move against the government is basically worked out, not from within Ukraine, but from forces outside of Ukraine, like the Baltic states, which are being used today by the deep state or London to go against the government or Washington even. So this is what has happened in Ukraine. No stability at all.
If not Zelensky, who? That's the part that confuses me. Like, let's say for the moment that Donald Trump gives 50 days. He knows he can't get anything out of Putin. And his thought is, okay, I need to push Zelensky. Zelensky is not going to be pushed. He's probably terrified for his life if he tries to stop the war. British, Europeans are backing him. And so the US puts pressure on him through protests with this notion of having a Maidan 2.0. He knows it. And so he decides, okay, I'm going to try to solidify power. And one of the ways he does it is going after these organizations, since these organizations that you point out are controlled by United States elements. The US at that point uses this as a pretext for this level of pressure that is being applied to him. If they want to get rid of him in order to, let's say, have somebody more malleable, who would they use for that? I don't know who they would use in the coup government that would be more malleable to Trump's wants.
Trump wants nobody within Ukraine. And the reality is, if Zelensky, yes, he's trying maybe to maneuver this, as I said, the same power, but also if he'll be pressured to stop the war on the front lines where it is today. But we're forgetting about the factor, and everybody is always, mostly in the West, about Russia. Russia's moving forward. Russia doesn't need to stop on where it is right now. Russia asked to stop months before it started moving forward. Nobody agreed to that. When the Istanbul, the first meetings happened, that was a possibility. Then it started moving too fast. It could have been stopped in 2022 also, but nobody did anything then. Today, Russia's moving actually pretty fast and pretty forward. They're taking over almost around 25 square kilometers per day, from 25 square kilometers per day, and within the month of June, they took over 580 square kilometers of territory. And this is pretty fast compared to how the strategy is, not to just basically, not as Israel comes into Gaza, destroys the shit out of everything, and then moves it forward, and then that's how. No, they're tactically moving forward, trying to keep whatever's in there as much as possible because they understand who's going to rebuild it. They will, because that's going to be their brand. It's going to be their new territories. What how they're doing in LNR, DNR republics, and the new territories that were freed by Russia. So this is the reality that we have to understand. What Trump wants, what the situation is, what the reality is, you have to agree with Russia what they want. If you agree with Russia, and that there is a possibility, and there still is, for Trump to do that, to change the government, bring in a neutral figure, somebody who can come in from to be the Speaker of the Parliament, because that's the only legitimate body Ukraine has today, that will sign the peace deals with the Russian Federation, then reboot the system and basically go after any Nazism within the system, within Ukraine, go against people, stop going against people who are Russian or the Russian church, start doing that, bring the law back to order, and start going for elections within a 6 to 8 month process, having real opposition involved, not just Poroshenko, Klitschko, and all the crowd, Timoshenko, who are controlled by the West. I said Klitschko is a German citizen. Poroshenko basically works for the CIA, the deep state of Washington. He's not the loyalist to Trump team, to Trump world. So does Klitschko. They hate Trump. And anybody else in the political elites that are still in Ukraine, that are still viable in Ukraine, they're there because they're protected by the deep state or the MI6 or the CIA, who are working against the president, Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So you need real opposition, which is outside of Ukraine, to be on the ballots, and that's a peaceful step for Ukraine to be left in a process where you bring in a neutral person to the Speaker of the Parliament, one of the members of Parliament today. He comes in for as they did after the coup with Turchinov. The West already used this situation, but it needs to be today agreed upon with Moscow how it's going to work out, because that's the only way out of this. You cannot leave Moscow out of these negotiations and these talks and do a coup against Zelensky and then say, oh, this is the new reality. There's going to be Poroshenko. He's going to continue the war because people supported him. If you want to do that, the U.S. is going to lose more and more. Ukraine is going to be lost, and Ukraine is going to be all freed by Russia. And it's going to be not just an independent state, because we're talking about the future of Ukraine, most of it, not just the regions that were freed by the Russian forces, but Kiev and parts of even Western Ukraine. It can be still an independent state. In Odessa, it can still be an independent state, but working closely with Russia and Minsk and China and also the EU, no problem. But it can be an independent state, but it's going to be loyal to Moscow rather than Washington. But if this continues, Ukraine will be then, not as an independent state, but as a part of a region, a couple of regions, part of Moscow or part of Russia directly, and not being independent at all, because that's the Russian forces will take over and free all those regions by force, which nobody wants to do. And that's what the Washington is pushing for.
Last question. Do you see that the Rada agreed to the Naboo and Sapo law? So if they're agreeing to the law, and just to be clear, Ukraine is not wrong in this case. I mean, these organizations that are external to Ukraine that are effectively controlling, or at the very least influences the politics of Ukraine. So I'm not making the argument that they're wrong. But the fact that so much pressure is being applied to Ukraine from Europe, the US, internally, and the parliament, the Rada, still said, yes, we agree with the law. Does that mean that there is anybody in the Rada that could take over, that will be a neutral figure?
There's more neutral figures than others within the Rada. Like I said, we talk about Timoshenko as an option. She could basically be one of those neutral figures that can, in her basically last years of political cycle, she can save the country by being that neutral figure that would lead Ukraine to elections.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that she can be she will be, or I support her as the new leader of Ukraine. No, she can be the neutral figure from within both sides, Russia and Washington, as leading. That's an option as a strong figure that could take this situation in hands and lead Ukraine to elections, and then have real elections with opposition, with people with open borders, that people can come back to Ukraine, not be get all the political prisoners freed, etc., etc. All that situation basically turn the page of what happened under the Zelensky dictatorship and start a new page for Ukraine. That's an option. She came out and did not support Nabu and Sapu on the situation because that's the reality. Is a lot of people in Ukraine do not support those organizations. I do not support them. There were. I knew the head of Nabu, Artem Sitnik, who was in Washington in the meeting with the Russia hoax when it all started. I was there and I saw how these heads of the prosecutors, the special anti-corruption prosecutor Kholodnitsky, the head of Nabu, Artem Sitnik, were like dogs in front of a cookie in front of the National Security Council in the White House, saying, "Yes, we will do whatever you tell us to do." Basically, the Department of Justice were ramming words into their mouth while they were talking and negotiating with the National Security Council. The FBI was telling them what to say right during the conversation, during the meeting. So this is what it was. A very unsovereign body, which basically led Ukraine to lose its sovereignty, and the corruption from outside of Ukraine led Ukraine to war today. Because what happened is corruption led by Biden and everybody else led Ukraine to be more and more corrupt. So I supported the destruction of Nabu. I do not support what Zelensky is doing because he's doing it for himself, not for the country. That's a different situation. So whatever Timoshenko said today while the vote, that's what a lot of people do come out and talk about. They do not support these organizations. But at the same time, as I said, the parliament is very loyal to Zelensky. The parliament is afraid because there's tap wires and files by the Zelensky government on everybody within the Ukrainian parliament today that can be used against them. Some of them parliamentarians I know that were in opposition before. They were captured at the beginning of the conflict and they were tortured. Some of them by the security service of Ukraine, and that's how they became loyal to the regime. So there's a lot of cases, but as soon as it starts crumbling, half of the Rada will run away. I will tell you, a lot of people, a lot of those pro Soros guys within the Rada, within the Zelensky team, they will run away from Ukraine. The ones who will stay, and so this already Ukraine went through this in 2014. It can be played by the book if you want to do it the most easy way in the situation to save a country. If the West, because the West right now can save Ukraine from total destruction or from the total annihilation, and then we'll easier for us to rebuild it. But if they will go the path to totally destroy Ukraine, just to make Moscow pay for this, because it's going to be under Russian territory anyway, and somebody will have to rebuild it. And just to make Moscow pay for this more and waste more money, and they don't care about the people. We know that they don't care about the people, but that's going to be the face of the West totally. We'll have in the future. Ukraine should have, will never have, really good relationship with anybody in the West if they do this.
Andrii, thank you for this. Really great breakdown. Really, I mean, fantastic. Andrii Telizhenko, he is a Ukrainian whistleblower, former diplomat. He was there when all of this started. And I appreciate him joining me this morning for his analysis. You have a safe day, man. Be safe.
Thank you, Jamal. All the best to you. All the best to your viewers and listeners. God bless.
Thank you. All right, Andrii, it's fantastic. Great breakdown of what is taking place. I love the fact that he said, yeah, I think Scott was right on this. Zelensky is not going to leave in his mortal coil. He knows too much, which is pretty, I'm not going to say astonishing, but I mean, you are playing politics on somewhat of a high level, right? Yeah. Shout out to Andrii. I agree with him, by the way. I do think this was AstroTurf, but I think it's AstroTurf with the idea of bringing people who is real grass. And that sounds weird. Meaning what starts off as AstroTurf allows other people to say, hey, we agree that we don't like things that are taking place, in which case more and more people show up. So what you start off is like a kernel, a template that allow other people to kind of fill it with their own issues. So if you don't like the press gangs, okay, that's an issue. If you don't like the fact that your kid was killed and dragged into the front line, okay, that's an issue. All of those people end up coming out to the protests, even though the people who started off that protest may not necessarily, or might have been on the payroll. So there is that. I'm going to cut this piece because I want to give what I think is a breakdown of what is occurring right now and what is taking place. And I hit Mark up this morning because I wanted to even see if Mark could join me. But I had to bounce ideas off of him just to get his own take on what was taking place. And I think our ideas were in somewhat of alignment, even though I don't know if the totality of my point of view is in Mark's. It's just what I bounced off of him. There's several things that are taking place right now. One, Russiagate. And I'll just start off Russiagate. Donald Trump, at every opportunity, is trying to bring up Russiagate. Tulsi Gabbard has released a huge amount of documentation. Tulsi Gabbard is saying she's going to release more documentation. And they have implicated Obama in the whole Russiagate thing, effectively saying, look, this was nonsense. It doesn't exist. Obama used this as a political weapon. Obama, Hillary Clinton, Brennan, etc., as a way to go after me and damage me. And to be fair, they did try to do this. Listen to what they were saying at the time when they were talking about Russiagate. They conflated a hack with hacking the election in order to get Donald Trump in office, which by definition is trying to imply that Donald Trump didn't win on his own steam. He won because the Russians pushed him over the finish line.
Russia hacking the election to elect Trump is the end of our democracy. Votes were definitely affected. Russia hacked the election to tilt it to Mr. Trump.
The Russians definitively hacked the election.
Russia did hack the election.
No doubt. The Russians hacked the election.
Yes, Russia hacked the election.
Now, again, all of these organizations were repeating this over and over and over again. And in saying this, they're effectively saying Donald Trump was pulled over the finish line by Vladimir Putin, and that Russia instigated, intruded into American politics in order to get a president elected, which means by definition, the president is illegitimate. A country that we consider to be an enemy going all the way back to the Cold War, if not further, got a president in office against the person who was supposed to be elected, which was Hillary Clinton. And they repeated it over and over and over again. They repeated it all throughout Donald Trump's election, even trying to get him to pass sanctions against Russia, which would have, by definition, would have been Trump admitting that he didn't get elected on his own steam. Russiagate was a big deal. And I kept telling you, going back for years, Russiagate was a hoax. They didn't have this evidence that they were saying. All of this stuff was come out by the Steele dossier, or for that matter, which was stovepiped into the FBI, which was a document from a political opposition figure. And then they went with the notion that Russia hacked Hillary Clinton emails. Again, when Tulsi Gabbard released information, what you were seeing in that information was that they didn't have explicit evidence that it was true. Aaron Matei wrote a fantastic piece on this where he went through the documentation that Tulsi Gabbard released about what the intelligence services knew, and what they knew was not much. But they used that to go after Donald Trump. So when Donald Trump comes out and tries to kill two birds with one stone, I know you guys want to talk about Epstein, but I want to talk about Russiagate. Okay, yeah, he's deflecting in this. He's trying to get rid of the Epstein thing in lieu of, hey, we should be talking about Russiagate. We should be talking about Russiagate. But it's not a coincidence that the attacks on Russiagate are coming at the exact same time that there are attacks on Zelensky. So if you are trying to come up with a deal, let's say that you want to end the war. Let's say you want to end the war. Donald Trump, two things. A, he doesn't want to look weak. And B, he doesn't want to look like he's being knuckled under for Vladimir Putin. Two objectives. In those two objectives, if you're trying to make any kind of deal, both of those issues become a problem, especially when you have this idea of Russiagate looming over your head, that you are somehow working with Putin and you're somehow a tool of Russia, a Manchurian candidate that Russia has deployed upon the United States, like Lenin was deployed by the Germans into Russia. That is a problem, especially if you, Donald Trump, you have a full-blown ego, and that is not the way you want to be characterized. It presents another problem if you're trying to negotiate, and that is hanging over your head. So Donald Trump says, I'm giving a 50-day ultimatum. Okay. But Trump knows that that ultimatum is going to be ignored by the Russians. They don't care. They are going to continue to pursue their own military objectives. Donald Trump also knows that his proxy is the one that he has some level of control over, meaning Zelensky, and for that matter, the Ukrainian government. You get the first shot fired. Seymour Hersh comes out with an article that effectively is saying that the Trump administration is trying to get rid of Zelensky, right here. First shot. Bam. You got other articles coming out at the exact same time, effectively coming out with the same thing. Zelensky is an authoritarian, Zelensky has betrayed Ukraine, etc. And initially it's like, okay, well, you know, Hersh probably talked to somebody in the White House and they probably floated that idea. All right. Zelensky goes to solidify his power base. So Yermak reshuffles the administration. And on top of reshuffling the administration, apparently, the investigations from Nabu and Sapo, offices that are effectively controlled by the United States and that are not controlled by Ukraine, start looking into Ukrainian affairs around Zelensky and the people who are circling around Zelensky. All right. When this takes place, the Rada immediately puts out a law. For one, Zelensky raided those offices. I think it was like dozens. And came up with the idea that the Russians have infiltrated Nabu and Sapo, and so now we have to do something about these organizations. Okay. A law immediately comes up, and Zelensky signs that law almost immediately, taking place over the course of a few hours. Out of the blue, you also get protests that just spring up out of nowhere. Protests usually take a little bit of time to organize, but these took no time to organize. They're holding flags, they're holding signs, they're effectively trashing Yermak, they're trashing Zelensky. They're taking place all over Ukraine. Now, I would tell you, CIA, MI6, NGOs, all of these things were still in Ukraine. None of these things have never left Ukraine. And so I would wager to you that many of these people are paid very well. They're paid very well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that A, you get an attack on Russiagate by Tulsi Gabbard DNI, and B, you also get protests going after Zelensky immediately after Seymour Hersh puts out his article. On top of the protests, in a coordinated attack on Zelensky, you get articles like this. Zelensky just betrayed Ukraine's democracy and everyone fighting for it. Here's another one. We know how to stand up for our rights. Ukrainian protest law threatening anti-corruption institutions. Here's another one. Anger builds in Ukraine as Zelensky signs law targeting corruption watchdog. Here's another one. This one is from The Economist. Yes, I accept. Outrage in Ukraine as government attacks anti-corruption watchdogs. And by virtue of you having protests, you immediately get articles boosting, amplifying the protests. There might be 1,000 people out there. It doesn't matter. The fact that a protest exists is enough to get media headlines talking about the fact that there's a protest, meaning there's opposition. People are angry. People are upset. Zelensky is trying to become an authoritarian, which is a bit funny considering that the government was, for all intents and purposes, under the thumb of the United States and even its European backers in 2014 when the coup took place. Now, the other interesting part of this is obviously Zelensky is backed by MI6. Many of the Europeans want to see him stay in office. But if Donald Trump wants to try to get some kind of deal, and again, postulate two things. Trump doesn't want to look weak, and it doesn't want to seem like he's knuckling under to the Russians. Okay, you go after the Russiagate thing, A. B, you give an ultimatum, which you kick the can down the road. C, you start going after Zelensky himself if you believe that Zelensky is the impediment to getting anything done with the Russians, because you know that you have no power over the Russians. Let's go to the Russians for a moment. Vladimir Putin puts out what he wants. No expansion of NATO. The 5 regions are ours. That is off the table from here on out. No continuing to build up the military in Ukraine. His wants. Let's assume for the moment that his wants, like every wants when you begin negotiations, are maximalists. Let's assume they're maximalists. Personally, I think they're reasonable. If you want a ceasefire, then the idea that you're going to continue to give them weapons is nonsense. The idea that you're going to put troops in Ukraine is nonsense. The idea that you're going to continue to give intel, etc., nonsense. All of that stuff is off the table. But let's assume for the moment that they're maximalist demands. And within the context of the core demands that Putin actually has, that he actually believes he can get accomplished, that there's leeway, there's wiggle room, whatever that wiggle room is. But you can't get anything done with somebody like Zelensky, with even in the context of the wiggle room and those core demands. And let's say Trump believes that and knows that and have decided that the issue here is Zelensky. And within the context of those 50 days, something needs to take place to get him out of office or to damage him politically, where you can try to scoot him and move him out of office. And so from Trump's point of view, at 50 days, I believe there's a deal to be had with the Russians, because that's what he wants, a deal, but he doesn't want to look weak in the context of that deal. And if Zelensky is screaming and crying, oh my God, the United States is capitulating, then that makes you look within the context of that deal. And you know he's not going to agree to it anyway. He could protest. And they start on an issue that is bizarre. Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries in the context of any country that ever existed. The public has to know that Ukraine is one of the most corrupt countries. There was talk about paying off press gangs in order to prevent those press gangs from taking you, meaning if you pay them off, then they will leave you alone. Or if you pay them a certain amount, they will get the body of your family member. When I say this government is radically corrupt, it's radically corrupt. It was understood that Zelensky and many of the people around him were pocketing money and shoving that money off to buy houses or cars or whatever else. Are you telling me that the public didn't know that until today? I don't buy that premise. Are you telling me that the public, who is agitated and pissed off and have been fighting press gangs, was not agitated until today, where they would come out chanting, fuck Yermak? Are you telling me that all of this started only today? I don't buy it. I don't buy it. Here's another one. They're saying we're not idiots. That's pretty astonishing, right? That's pretty astonishing. Add to it this, where people are very unhappy about the press gangs. They've started fighting the press gangs, and you get a situation like this. This is a guy who they're trying to throw into a van. Bam, knock him out. One punch. This is not just today. That has been taking place all throughout Ukraine. Ukrainians have been given money and resources and information to blow up those press gang centers in order to prevent the press gangs from being able to go after people in the locations. You can't tell me that the ire and anger just started today over two organizations that I'm even unclear on how much the Ukrainians even knew about. Very unclear. So, okay, we're at the last part. So, if you are Donald Trump, you want to make a deal. You want to look tough in the context of that deal. You believe there's a deal to be had. How do you get that? And would you come up with the idea of a color revolution 2.0 to get rid of the person who you think is standing in the way of the deal that you want to make? You want to look good. You want to look strong. You want to say, I'm the deal maker. I'm the guy that was able to get a deal. Zelensky right now is being forced to go back into negotiations. I believe is going to take place Wednesday. He doesn't want to go to those negotiations, but he's forced to go to those negotiations. Why? A, Petros is about to fall. Russians have invaded. Ukrainians don't have the ability to push them back. And not just not have the ability to push them back, they have a severe manpower shortage that is making that much more difficult. Petros has been part of a battlefield that has been taking place for a while now, and the fact that it falls is a massive deal that is not minor. Chasiv Yar, again, It's about to fall. These are areas that have been focal points of fights that have been going on for months that Ukraine no longer has the military capability of doing anything in order to hold. To make it even worse, Patriots. How are you going to get them Patriot missile systems? Okay, well, Germany is supposedly giving them some. When is Germany going to give it? Who knows? Russia just blew up 2 Patriot batteries, meaning the entire system. Just blew up 2, just damaged 1. Russia's just hit a mercenary camp where apparently 100 mercenaries, if not more, have been either killed, wounded, or at the very least massively damaged. Russia's been firing 500 to 700 drones every day, with moments where they would sit back and watch and say, what is the battlefield assessment of damage? When the guy that works for Trump, Kellogg, went over to Ukraine, and they said, well, Kellogg is a missile defense shield all on its own. And Kellogg visited one plant after the next, after the next. The moment that Kellogg left, Russia blew up those plants, meaning they were able to discern where Kellogg was, where those plants were, and they blew those plants up. When they're launching 500 drones a night, Kim Jong missiles, what do you do for that? Let's say you had batteries. Can you really knock down 500 drones? Meaning Russia's producing so many that they're able to use that many per night. And not just in, they're using it on battlefield situations and everything else, not just in very specific targets. I'm saying that it is becoming clearer and clearer that the capability of Ukraine on the battlefield has been diminishing. And even if you give them weapons, who are going to carry those weapons? And this belief that you're going to have a drone fight as a way of dealing with your manpower shortage does not seem to be substantial. You're failing in your task. The US knows it. I would imagine on some level Ukraine knows it. So what do? You're forced to go and negotiate. Now, Ukraine is trying to limit the level of negotiations to exchanging of people, exchanging of bodies, and maybe having a meeting with Putin. Russia does not care about those things. Well, maybe they do, but not significantly. What they care about are their core objectives that they've been talking about for the last 3 years. No NATO expansion, not getting intelligence, limitations on Ukrainian military, limitations, or at the very least, approval of having other countries come in, no military from the standpoint of Europe or NATO on Ukrainian soil, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They have been open and willing to negotiate on those terms. As you get weaker on the battlefield, your resilience in saying no diminishes. If Trump wants to make a deal, this may be the way he's trying to do it. Now, I don't know if the American president can accept a deal from the Russians on the terms that the Russians are setting. I don't know. I don't know if the terms that Putin has given are maximalist, or if there's room within those that we have core objectives that we want to accomplish, and we're willing to give away certain other items in order to accomplish those core objectives. Maybe Trump and Putin have talked about what those core objectives are. Maybe Donald Trump thinks that if you can get rid of Zelensky and you have somebody more pliable, that they'll be willing to accept it. All of those things are question marks. The point that I'm making here, it is very super weird that these protests spring up in the way that they sprung up. Zelensky is Europe's guy. They don't want Zelensky to go anywhere. Trump, on the other hand, may. And considering that the US Embassy controls a lot of the stuff, is it a coincidence that Seymour Hersh comes out with his article? Is it a coincidence that all of a sudden all of these other articles come out going after Zelensky, especially considering that many of the publications, if you look at what USAID was doing in Ukraine, going all the way back to 2001, USAID was training journalists. I think 90% of the media was being supported and paid for by USAID, meaning that the media organizations were effectively underfunded by the US government. Is it a coincidence? Is it a coincidence? I think it is very weird. I think it's very strange. And of course, as I point out, when you ask Donald Trump anything about it, Trump would say, well, we should be talking about Russiagate. And part of the reason he wants to talk about Russiagate is put a knife in the idea that he's working with the Russians, something that you would need to do if you're trying to make a deal with those same Russians. I don't think people realize how much Russiagate poisoned the well of having any kind of deal or agreement with the Russians. One last point. Donald Trump said this. I believe this was today. Listen to what he's saying here. And think of who this is targeted at, as he is saying.
Didn't spend every gave away $350 billion worth of equipment or cash. Worse than equipment, cash. So we want to find out about that someday, I guess, right? But they were supposed to buy their own equipment, but I have a feeling they didn't spend every dollar on the equipment. But they are.
He is implying that money that the United States gave to Zelensky and to the Ukrainian government was taken in part by cash and is used and funneled somewhere. Meaning Donald Trump is amplifying this attack that is taking place on Zelensky right now, because if you're a Ukrainian and you know that Nabo and Sapo were investigating Zelensky and his inner circle, and Zelensky and his inner circle raids the buildings, detains, I think, 2 or 3 people associated with the organizations, and claim that they were infiltrated by the Russians, which is the reason why you were doing it. No one is going to believe that. What they're going to believe is that you raided the organizations because those organizations were investigating you, and that they were investigating you because there was something to investigate, and you raided them because you knew there was something to investigate because you were stealing money. Trump just amplified that line of attack against Zelensky and the Ukrainian government. If his objective was to keep Zelensky in office, is this really the language that you use when you are making statements like this? Is it random? Is it a coincidence? I don't think it is. I think that Scott Ritter, oddly enough, broken clock, when this one is right, that they have made the choice that we can't push Putin, we can't move Putin, we want to get a deal, there is a deal to be had. We can't get the deal with Zelensky in office, we need to get rid of Zelensky. And this is Color Revolution, Maidan 2.0, with the objective of doing so. Now, I could be wrong on all of this. I could be talking squarely out of my ass. So take it into consideration. What I am trying to formulate is a model that matches real world phenomena in regards to what I think the players who are in this want and what we're seeing transpire on the ground as it propagates. Let's see how long these protests go. Let's see how long these protests last. Let's see if they intensify. Let's see if more people get involved over the course of the next several days. Let's see what Trump says and how he handles what is taking place. To be very clear, though, Zelensky is not wrong for doing this. It's not wrong. It's self-serving. Yes, it's completely self-serving. But the United States doesn't have a foreign body in the United States, short of maybe the Federal Reserve. But we don't have a foreign entity from, let's say, the Europeans or somewhere else that is looking into matters of corruption. We consider ourselves a sovereign state. And as we consider ourselves a sovereign state, any state that considers itself sovereign would bristle at the notion that a foreign entity would have some kind of clout in your political affairs. Also, it doesn't seem like they're doing that good of a job considering how radically corrupt Ukraine is as a country. So for Ukraine to say, we're taking our sovereignty and we're getting rid of this organization, or at the very least, we're subordinating this organization under my leadership, that's not insane. It is self-serving. And I don't doubt one iota that there's something that the organization could find if indeed the organization was looking for some level of corruption coming out of the Zelensky regime. It's just when you're doing this, and this is after you've taken dictatorial powers by eliminating political opposition, throwing other political opposition in jail, and on top of throwing other political opposition in jail, effectively declaring martial law and declaring yourself effectively a king who's going to stay in office for as long as there's martial law, because, #reasons. The United States, when we were having our civil war under Abraham Lincoln, we had elections because you never know if the public actually wants to do something different. And it is believed that Zelensky's approval rating at this point is about, as popular as head lice, and that he would lose any election that effectively came up. So the pressure that is being applied to this government at this point, as Andrii pointed out, is most likely, at the very least in its inception, external. will there be other people who join in these protests to make it more legit? And the answer is probably yes. We'll see. Again, this is my model of events. I could be entirely and completely wrong, even though up to this point, I've been damn accurate in my reporting on these issues around the world. But we'll see. We will see. We will see. Let's go to chats. We have about 5 minutes. Margaret Kimberly is going to be joining us shortly. She is great. Love her to death. She just got back from China. And so we are going to have a conversation about that. She wants to talk about Epstein. Her point of view about the Epstein thing is that the Democrats are so full of it. They could have released those files under Joe Biden, but they didn't release those files under Joe Biden. And now they're trying to make political hay of it. On top of that, Ghislane Maxwell is now, there's been so much pressure that's been applied to Donald Trump on the Epstein issue that every time you talk to Trump about it, Trump has been effectively getting eaten alive by it. He's trying to make it as if he had no relation to Epstein when they were the best of friends, best of buds, been the best of buds for decades. CNN has video of them hanging out at parties together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This has been a blot on his presidency in a way that nothing else has. For obvious reasons. You are throwing your body to protect pedophiles. That is the belief in MAGA. So Donald Trump is put into this weird position where he has to now come up with some of the reason and justification in order to throw chum into the water to try to run the other way, the Obama and then run the other way. Well, that hasn't worked. That hasn't worked. That hasn't worked at all. He can talk about Obama all he wants. At the end of the day, you are protecting pedophiles. That's what it is understood to be. That is what it is. So he has been put into this unenviable position of saying, okay, Bondi, try to release something so people will be okay with it. Because at the end of the day, what people believe is that the reason that Trump doesn't release the files is because he's in those files. Now, when Trump was asked about this, the first thing he brings up is, well, we should be talking about Obama. We shouldn't be talking about Epstein thing. All right. What Pam Bondi has decided to do, or what Trump has decided to push Pam Bondi to do, is to get Ghislane Maxwell to talk to the Justice Department. Now, if you hear this and you think to yourself, hey, this is great. I have a bridge to sell you on Saturn. If Donald Trump is waiving a pardon in front of Ghislane Maxwell will whistle Dixie if you ask her to, which means that that testimony matters zero, zilch. What people want to know is who's in those files. Who are the Johns? Who are the people that Epstein was feeding the kids? That's what people want to know. And if one of those people were Donald Trump, you would never get that information out of Ghislane Maxwell. If indeed that same Donald Trump is the one that can give her a pardon to get her out of jail. So, yes, interesting, rare. This is Gabbard, who's come out effectively saying there's a huge trove of documents coming out about Obama and the Russiagate thing. But again, this is a dodge. That's not what people want to know. That's not what people even care about. It's important, yes. It has political significance in regards to the way the U.S. was tilted against Russia being completely incapable of making any kind of deal. That's true. But what people want to know is who are the Johns? Who are the people Ghislane Epstein was feeding the kids? Who are the people that Mossad or whoever has political leverage over that may be affecting our political affairs? And the catch and the problem is that if you offer Ghislane any kind of deal, how do you know that what she's saying is true, considering it's Trump that's offering her the deal? That's the issue. That's the issue. Let me go to the chat real quick because we have a little bit of time. Congratulations on your 200th show. I've learned a lot with you doing your show. I wish you so many more shows. Congrats again. Have you heard anything else about Lath? Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Alexander G, Thanks, Dan. We appreciate you. I appreciate my mama too. Thank her. Congrats on the 200th show and our good work. Thank you, Ann. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I thought it was 4. It was. Happy 200th episode. Good morning, everyone. Yes, as I pointed out, this is a special show. This is my 200th episode. I'm very proud that this is my 200th episode. And I thank all of you for joining me on this episode. Yes, Lath is doing well. I spoke to him this morning. He's out. He said he's physically fine. That was a very specific language. So I would imagine there was a bit of mental trauma or stress that he had to endure being in this kind of legal gray area. From my understanding, Lath was there. He didn't have a press pass, or he didn't have the journalistic documents necessary. He has been going there for a very long time. This has never really been an issue. This time it was an issue. I suspect there was some level of intimidation by the Lebanese military intelligence, that they were trying to make a point with him, putting him in this weird legal limbo where he wasn't charged with anything. By the same token, they were detaining him. But he's out. He's safe. The world is good. I want to bring on my guests. We are joined with Margaret Kimberly. Margaret Kimberly is, there we are. Margaret Kimberly is senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report, author of Presidential, Black America and the Presidents. And you can find her on Twitter at Freedom Ride Blog. Margaret, welcome back to America. How you doing? You doing all right?
I'm jet lagged. I just came back from China and I looked very blurry. So I'm concerned about that. But anyway, I'm doing okay. I got back from China Monday night.
Yeah.
But
now for the blurriness, you could try to cut the camera off and cut it back on, or dip out and dip back in. Sometimes that helps. I know it helps with mine.
Let's see. I will.
Just go out and come back in. It may help. All right.
Better.
Okay. Yes, that is better.
Okay. We'll start over. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Welcome back from China. I've only had the opportunity to go on like a 12-hour pass, and the only thing I did was go into a hotel and sleep for that 5-6 hours. How was it? How was your trip?
Oh, it was amazing. Black Agenda Report was invited to participate in the Belt and Road Journalists Forum, which this year was held in Jiangxi province, which is in southern China, which is very hot. I was not prepared for that. But anyway, so it was quite an honor. The only U.S. outlet to have been invited. It's an opportunity mostly for journalists from nations that participate in the Belt and Road Initiative, trade initiative with China. But we were very pleased that Black Agenda Report was invited to join. It's a testament to our work. Met and participated with journalists from every continent. Touring, of course, Jiangxi is very historic. You know, the porcelain that we call China, lest we forget, Jiangxi province is the home of that production of those ceramics and that porcelain. It's a 1,000-year history of production, and we're going back to the first Silk Road of ancient days, and it still is a leading producer of ceramics. The Long March, Mao's Long March in 1934, 1935 started in Jiangxi province. The People's Liberation Army started in Jiangxi province. So this is an area of great historic significance in the history of the People's Republic of China, and had this amazing opportunity to be in dialogue with other journalists. So it was great.
That's so cool. I'm so jealous. But you guys do fantastic work. So if anybody from the States get the invite, you guys deserve it. Yeah, you absolutely deserve it. This is the video that you sent me that you wanted to play. I'm going to play this from the beginning.
So this mania, this obsession with the U.S. trying to diminish China's economic prowess, we see once again how it will always fail. We first heard about DeepSeek in the United States earlier this year. Many other people had never heard of this company, which a new AI platform, comparable quality to ChatGPT, but a lot less expensive, open source, all of these things that we were told couldn't happen. And it all happened in part because of the US trying to restrict technology to China. People will innovate and get around it and produce something better.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean,
Yep.
obviously, the U.S. is trying to do anything and everything in its power to restrain a Chinese economy that is with an industrial base that is ungodly. Like, there's nothing to compete with it. Even the U.S.'s capability during the Second World War, with China and the size of, we're talking about a country of 1.3 billion people. And you're right. Please dig into that for me. I mean,
well, a couple of things. It's, I think it's important. We're always hearing about how China stole technology or did something nefarious to gain this, become this manufacturing colossus. But the U.S. played a role. The finance capital in the U.S. said, we don't need manufacturing capital. We can send it all to China, put China in the World Trade Organization. And they took it and ran with it. I also, of course, give them credit for their, they call it reform and opening up in the Deng Xiaoping era. But so the U.S. played a role in giving China this, helping China along to gain this kind of prowess. But of course, we now know if you're the manufacturing leader, you'll be the economic leader. So we're in, they're in this panic about China. There's always some crazy idea to stop China. So we're going to keep them from getting chips. So they work around it. I don't know the technical terms or the details, but they worked around it and created DeepSeek, which is, now I don't use AI myself, so I'm relying on what others say, that it's comparable to ChatGPT. And I know it's a lot less expensive. We were told, oh, it has to cost $1 jillion and you've got to get all these investors. And nope, they did it anyway. So that is an example of the futility of trying to diminish China's economic prowess. It's not going to happen. Trump's crazy tariffs, every day it's something different because they don't know what to do. It's not just Trump being, who this, wackadoodle that he is. They don't know what to do. So they, say first the tariffs were something like 100%. I don't remember the number. It was something crazy.
It was like 240%. It was some insane, some ridiculous number.
And then China, what do? They say, China used to buy soybeans from U.S. farmers. They said, forget that. We'll buy soybeans from Brazil. Yep. Buying beef. They said, well, we can buy that from Australia. So everything, and they've undercut these people, these, this agricultural trade, everything the U.S. does to try to stop China. You can't, the U.S. cannot hurt China without hurting itself.
Right.
That's
and rare minerals. That was the other one where they were like, all right, you require these rare earth minerals for your military vehicles, for your automotives. Maybe we'll slow down the number that we're going to put out. Like, meaning, you're right. China had prepared for the United States to do this during the first Trump administration, because when Trump came back in, they were ready for it. In which case, they didn't back down from the tariffs. They passed reciprocal tariffs. Yep. The United States is the one who ultimately had to back down, where Trump kept telling people, well, I'm on the phone with Xi Jinping. No, you weren't. No, you weren't. You weren't. And yeah, they're doing everything in their power. It's so wild, right? Like, the United States is supposed to be this capitalist country. We're supposed to believe in the capitalist values, where if you have a better product and you can do it cheaper, then people should be able to buy that product. And then the moment that the U.S. cannot compete on an even keel, they freak out. They just totally freak out.
It's like being gangsters. It's, there's electric vehicles, and Biden continued Trump's tariffs. There is a 100% tariff on Chinese electric cars. There's a brand, BYD. It's Build Your Dream is what it stands for. It's the leading, they're the leading electronic vehicles in China. They're some of the best in the world. Americans cannot buy them. but they're making it anyway. First of all, they have their own market. How about that? People forget just very basic information in their craziness. 1 billion people, you've got your own market. Yep. So you see these BYD vehicles everywhere in Chinese cities, but Americans can't get them. The best electronic vehicles Americans cannot buy. And as you were saying, it's a protection racket. It's like, capitalism is all about freedom and free markets, up to a point. And then it's let's crush anybody who gets in our way. So I think that's something important to remember in general about capitalism and what we're told about it.
China is fascinating to me. And this, I guess, is going to be the last question on it. They have come up with this model of riding the capitalistic bull without being taken over by the bull. So one of the arguments that China will make is like, dude, it was a win-win. We were able to get the money that we were able to build, and we used it to build infrastructure, bridges. They're about to build the largest electric dam, these massive Earth projects that they've been doing, putting stuff into space, putting a base on the moon. That's what we decided to use our money for, high-speed rail, except you decided to allow your oligarchs to build new houses for themselves, to get a third car, to get, it's like basically, in one sense, it's like, this is what we can do with money in order to build a society. You decided to just give it to your oligarchs to play around with without it necessarily going to the state. How did you see it when you were there? I mean, give us a sense of what it looked like being there.
It's a socialist country. So it's the state that tells the corporations what to do. It's not like here where the corporations run the government. Yeah. And speaking of AI and the big, beautiful bill, there's a prohibition on regulation of AI.
10 years.
States and cities want to regulate, and they can't. So that is emblematic of how the U.S. works, where the private sector controls our lives. We live under billionaire rule. We live under corporate rule. In China, it's the the Communist Party of China, CPC, that is the state which decides what's going to happen. So they will let people make money. They have a private sector, but the private sector does not rule. It is the state through the people through the state who determine what's going to happen in the country. And that is a kind of, we're always, do you remember when Biden was president and they're always like, is Xi Jinping a dictator? Is China a dictatorship? And they were, obsessing about, trying to find some inscribed China. Mm-hmm. Don't we live in we have a dictatorship of capital. We live in the dictatorship of money. So they, but insisting that we have this democracy, which, we don't really have. So that is a kind of democracy when the government takes the people's needs into account. And it's not just letting people make money for the sake of making money. It's how does this impact the people? Does this benefit the people? Does this hurt the people? So you have this great infrastructure. One of the things I was able to do was take a trip on their high-speed rail. It's an amazing system. The train station and not just I suppose a medium-sized city was amazing. It was beautiful. All this new architecture, new infrastructure. Of course, if you're not trying to be the leader in defense spending, then you can spend money on things that benefit the people. It's amazing to see. And I've always said that if you have the opportunity to travel, you should travel to a country you're told not to like. And I think China is on that list, so you can see it for yourself. And I have to tell you one other thing. This is my new measure of civilization. I have been to, my second trip to China, I've been to 5 or 6 major cities. I have yet to see anybody sleeping on the street. I have yet to see a panhandler. I have yet to see anybody lying on the sidewalk like you see here in New York or major cities across the United States.
Yeah. I mean, the cities are gorgeous. Like just,
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
some of them are just breathtaking, like in regards to size and scale. And you're absolutely right about it's almost as if I asked this question the other day and I got a lot of pushback for it, but I don't think I'm wrong on it. I pointed out, I said, well, what have we done good? And they would give technical achievements. And I was like, well, my standard is not technical achievements. Like, for example, Cuba is a smaller country, it sends doctors all around the world. That's a good. That is an ethical, moral good. Your ability to not have people laying on the streets when you have other people stepping over them to get into their limo. Okay, that's a moral bad. And I guess my point that I was trying to make is Nazis can make fantastic airplanes. Just because you have technical accomplishment, that's not the same thing as being good.
Right.
Like ethics, it's a different thing. Speaking of ethics, this is our president who's doing any and everything in his power to avoid the issue of Epstein because he's tied to him at the hip. Yeah. And everybody at this point believes that Donald Trump is on those lists, which is the reason why he's protecting pedophiles who've been feeding children to grown men. This is Trump hanging out with Epstein. Now, I want to get your take on this because there's new information that's been coming out. This is them at a party in 1999. Trump's acting like he didn't know Epstein. Epstein? Who's Epstein? What's Epstein? What's a jail? What do you mean he was in jail? He's doing everything in his power to get away from this. And his own supporters are eating him alive, as they should. As they should. He cannot get away from this issue. Democrats have been annoying me on this. They've been annoying me. Give me your take on this idea of Democrats now piping up and trying to associate Trump with Epstein as a political weapon.
Well, the whole Epstein, there's one very important thing to know about Epstein. Epstein was an Israeli agent.
Yes.
Sex trafficking ring, the purpose was to compromise powerful men. Bill Clinton, Prince Andrew, I think Bill Gates had, some visits to his island, other very prominent people. Epstein worked for the Israeli government. Ghislane Maxwell's father was a British newspaper publisher who was very close to Israel as well. So that's what you need to know about Epstein, about why he was protected for so long, why you don't see a list. But Trump and his people, they whipped their folks up, and this whole, it's so funny to me. It's this whole thing about a deep state and they're hiding things from Epstein. Well, there is a deep state, and yes, it was working on behalf of Epstein, but they didn't mention what I just mentioned about who he worked for and what he did. Right. So no, you're not going to get the full story on Epstein. Now, as far as Trump and Epstein, we know they were friends. We know they knew each other for a long time, long before anybody thought that Donald Trump was ever going to be president of the United States. Mm-hmm. So, first of all, I don't know what this list is. We know who went to Epstein's island. We know we have these names. So I don't even know what people are talking about. I think Democrats talking a lot about it now. Frankly, it's a sign of their weakness as a party. They do not know how to fight Trump. They're ambivalent about fighting Trump. Frankly, I think that's their problem. They do not. They don't know what to do with Trump. Trump has cut them out. The thing that usually happened, the minority party would get something. Trump's cut them out completely. Trump has actually cut Republicans in Congress out too, ruling with executive orders and getting away with it for the most part. So Democrats are flummoxed. They don't know what to do. The easiest thing for them to do, which would have kept Trump from winning, would be to represent the interests of their voters and do what their voters want them to do. So that's why they're in trouble. So they are riding this silly, I think it's a silly story because nobody talks about who Epstein was and what he did. And there's some list and Trump's name is on this piece of paper and that's going to bring him down. No, it won't. I mean, he can only be impeached if Republicans go along, which they're not going to do. So it's really, to me, it's very silly. And they dug this hole for themselves with, Pam Bondi saying, we've got this list and we're going to show it to you. And they didn't think that through very obviously. So now they're hoisted on their own petard and they look silly, but that's not a reason for the rest of us to give it undue attention. That's my take on Epstein.
I agree and disagree.
Okay.
So the model of Epstein that is being put out is that you had this guy who was having sex with children and was feeding those children to men, powerful men, who had the ability for all different things, whether it was finance, whether it was politics, whatever those sections were. Israel at the Knesset, they just had this meeting where all of these people were coming out saying we were trafficked, they were satanic rituals. I mean, just outrageous stuff that the women were effectively saying. You have lawyers who say that, look, I have all of these victims of Epstein that the political space and the legal space did not want to talk to, whether it was under Joe Biden, whether it was under Trump's first term, or whether it's now. And so if we accept that Epstein was intelligence for Israelis, is there influence on our political space that we are just blindly unaware of? And is it part of the reason that many of these politicians have acted in the way that they've acted, that leverage is there? Meaning, if the Epstein thing is indeed an intelligence operation, then it's an intelligence operation for leverage over various people in finance or politics. We should know what that is. So I agree with you about, obviously Democrats are trying to use this when they could have put this list out for Joe Biden if they cared all that much about it. But if indeed he is what they say he is, that is a problem. We should know the Johns. And I agree with you.
Yeah, I that's a good point. That's a valid point, but it speaks to the larger issue of Zionist influence in the United States and the entire West, the collective West. This intelligence operation. Obviously, they pulled the plug on that part of it, but if we're going to talk about it, we have to talk about this capture of these interests on our political lives in this country. That people can. So, for example. Zionist groups can tell the Trump administration, we want you to get these people. So they arrest Mahmoud Khalil and other people because Zionists don't like them.
Right.
And that's it. That's all it is. These people, to some degree or other, spoke up for Palestine and they weren't citizens, so they were easy targets. And so we have this system where one group of private citizens can tell the government to go get this person because I don't like them. So we have to talk about all of that. We have to talk about AIPAC. We have to talk about here in New York City, where I live, there's a mayoral primary, a Democratic primary recently.
Yeah.
Yes, and a general election coming up in November. And Israel came up more than any other issue. All the things that you're supposed to be concerned about in the mayor's race that was just ignored. It's like, well, are you gonna visit Israel? And they all said, well, yes, I will visit Israel.
Right.
I mean, so, I talk about all of that, not to just get hung up in the weeds on Epstein, but talk about all of that and what it means.
I agree with you. I agree. And they're not going to talk about that. Meaning, I think part of the reason that they're not bringing this up is because you have to deal with the Mossad issue. And they don't want to deal with the Mossad issue. And just for our humor, Donald Trump apparently called in CNN. And this apparently took place. This is funny to me.
To Marla Maples. And this is the proof. Again, this has never been published before. So this is a new image. You haven't seen it out there on X or anything like that. This is the proof that Epstein attended Trump's wedding at the Plaza Hotel in New York. And
now Trump flipped out about this. If I'm not
in the photo,
from lifestyles of the rich and famous, and Epstein is behind them at the wedding, almost seeming to.
Okay. I thought Trump called into this, but fair enough. He didn't have to. He's been freaking out. He has been freaking out, and he's been playing this very poorly. I agree with you that the issue for this, well, I guess there are a few issues, but the issues for this more than anything else is A, the linkages to Israel. B, that they're not talking about the linkages to Israel. C, the powerful men who were for lack of a better way to put it, having sex with children, and see that the president seems to be doing everything in his power to throw his body to protect these powerful men who are having sex with kids. One thing broke today that I don't know if you had the opportunity to see. So after all the pressure that's been applied to Donald Trump, Ghislane Maxwell has come back into the public spotlight. And people are effectively saying, well, wait a minute, Ghislane Maxwell exists. If he was having sex with kids and she was a person feeding them to the kids or finding them, why don't you talk to her? So Pam Bondi is apparently sending the Justice Department to have a conversation with Ghislane Maxwell to see if she would expose people who are associated with Epstein. Right here. This is supposedly taking place sooner rather than later because Donald Trump is trying to get the stink off of him. Deputy Attorney General to meet Epstein accomplice Ghislane Maxwell. And as I pointed out, the victims or lawyers representing those victims have been effectively saying, hey, we're here. You can talk to us. If you want to know who raped us, we will tell you if you're willing to talk to us. And up to this point, nobody has been willing to. The issue with this is that Ghislane Maxwell, if a pardon is being waved in her face, obviously she is not going to say Donald Trump if Donald Trump is the one who's going to give her the pardon. So I don't even know if this is going to work. And one last thing before I get your take. Roy Black, the lawyer that was representing Epstein, has just shown up dead. I don't know if you've seen that.
I didn't.
Like, you can't make this up, right? Give me your thought. Give me your thoughts on this. This could be the last thing on Epstein.
Well, the dead lawyer, I was like, oh my God, and I don't know this man, maybe he had a bad heart for years and they just finally gave up. I have no idea. I know nothing about him. So it's just whisked for the mill.
Former Jeffrey Epstein lawyer Roy Black reported dead inside his home. The attorney represented Epstein and was instrumental in defending him in court.
It doesn't matter if he died by natural causes. Nobody's going to believe it. It's going to be part of Epstein lore that this guy was rubbed out by the deep state or something. It doesn't really, I wish he'd stayed alive a little bit longer, actually. But anyway, so this, and I have to say this about Ghislane Maxwell. She attended Chelsea Clinton's wedding. You know that, right?
She did. Yes, she did. Yes, she did. I mean, these people are gadflies all over the place, and now everybody's like, "We had no idea this guy existed."
I know. So it's it's a weird situation where it's definitely gotten under Trump's skin, which is why another reason that Democrats are talking about it so much. Excuse me, because they have no substance with which to fight Trump. So they're they're glommed onto it as well. But I just there's an element of this that is just not very serious. Trump and all politicians do this. They ginned up their people with stories about the deep state, and now they're stuck. And it's hard for made this big thing. We're going to release this list. I don't know why they said this, given Trump's connections with Epstein, but they did. So now they're trying to figure out how to get out of this mess of their own making. And Democrats are happy because they have nothing else to offer, except something scandalous about Trump. They are also not talking about the real issue of Epstein. They're not talking about that, and they don't want to talk about that. So that's where we are.
And by the way, they're stuck with many of these people are Democrats too.
Are something that's getting a lot of print and airtime, but anyway.
Yeah, but the main issue is just being ignored. Bill Clinton, Richard Clinton, Dershowitz, all of these people had relations. Dershowitz apparently didn't take his underwear off. Like, this stuff is just gross.
I don't want to think about Dershowitz with his underwear on or off. I'm sorry, you've got to tell me something important if you're going to put that image in my head.
Right.
But I think also to your point, we should know that these underage girls, let's just say girls, were lured into this prostitution ring in order to compromise powerful men, which is disgraceful. And Epstein was protected for a long time. I'm not sure who decided we're going to pull the plug on him. Sorry, Jeff, you're going to jail. But that's what happened. And I just want people to think about the bigger picture and not to get caught up in this, what's frankly foolishness.
No, I agree. I do agree. It's so gross. Like it's just gross on steroids. Like I feel like even for Trump cultists, this was a bridge too far. Right?
It was. They learned a lesson, I think, about, getting your people excited about certain things. You can't just do a 180 and expect them to forget it. They're like, wait a minute, I thought we were going to see a list.
Right. But I also think it's the issue itself. Like it's we are talking about men having sex with children. That's what we're talking about, right? Pedophiles.
Yes,
and it's like Alex Jones was befuddled. Alex Jones, because Alex Jones was like his audience, of anybody's audience, is full-throated in this belief that there's something demonic and satanic taking place with the rich and powerful and all this other stuff. And when Trump is like, yeah, there's nothing to see here, folks. Epstein, I don't even know if there was an Epstein. I've never met Epstein. What do you mean he was in prison? Like all of this stuff. What is prison? Does prison even exist? And Alex Jones was like, I don't understand why the president is doing this. The deep state is after him. Maybe it's like he had to go down another conspiracy theory trail only to, stay one step ahead of it. Let's talk AOC. I am super curious on your point of view on the AOC thing. So as the audience would know, AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene comes out with a bill to extract $500 million from the money that we give Israel. $500 million is a pittance in relation to what we give Israel, but it's something. And God bless her for doing it, right? AOC votes against the bill. Now, you only got like 6 or 8 members of Congress who voted for it. AOC was not among them. And AOC comes out and makes an argument. And I'm going to paraphrase, but the paraphrase is accurate. Look, I don't want to do anything that will help kill people. And so I don't want to do anything that would inhibit Israel from Iron Dome and Israeli defense. By the same token, this doesn't do anything to stop offensive weapons from going to Israel. And so obviously, I'm voting against it. And it's like, whoa, what do you mean? Obviously, for one. And two, why are you voting against a country that you would acknowledge, even in her tweet, is committing a genocide? So it's like, I need to protect the country committing the genocide. It's like, hey, I know these Nazis are throwing people in ovens, but we need to protect those Nazis. And it's like, whoa, that's mind-blowing. And then you're telling me, obviously, you're voting against it. She then doubles down. And in her double down, it's like, if you're trying to say that I'm sending money to Israel, then you're just not being truthful. And insinuated that Marjorie Taylor Greene was a Nazi or neo-Nazi. And that was part of the reason why she didn't vote for it, because there was a, quote, ulterior motive. It's like, so is Rashida Tlaib a Nazi also because she voted for it?
Yep.
Like, it's an outrageous Orwellian response to supporting a genocidal government that is literally starving, murdering people who are out there just trying to get food. Like, that's an astonishing take. Give me your take on AOC on this.
Well, it's just hilarious to me that AOC is on this issue to the right of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor, I mean, talk about the contradictions of that wing of the Republican Party, who don't want to give money to Ukraine anymore, who don't want to fund Israel anymore. But AOC she's not a real leftist. We don't really have leftists in U.S. politics. She plays this role, but of course, when there's a vote like this coming up, then you see who is really on quote unquote the left and who is not. She's an establishment person, and she's been given this role where she will give cover to Biden. And she would endorse him and say he's what did she say? He's exceeded expectations.
He's fighting for effectively fighting for a ceasefire. He's tirelessly. tirelessly. That's all he's doing. That's like every waking
Yes,
moment.
he and Kamala Harris were tirelessly, doing nothing of the sort. But so she is another one who's dug this hole for herself, because the Democratic Party is not going to countenance anybody. As you just pointed out, I think it was only 6 people who dared to vote for it, a tiny number of members of Congress, but she was not among them. And I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised at all. There's talk, I don't know if it'll happen, talk of her challenging Senator Schumer in a primary a couple years from now. So she's not going to be in favor of anything that is seen as in any way not supportive of Israel. And and the whole issue of Israel and the genocide is, it's just existential. I believe it's a defining issue for our time. It has become that. And we have to say it's Biden who started this, and Trump has continued what Biden began. Israel is starving the people of Gaza. People are starving to get death. Their goal is to pressure Jordan and Egypt to take people, which they don't want to do. They should not do. Jordan and Egypt, of course, are both client states of the U.S.
Yes.
But taking anybody from Gaza creates problems for them, because if they take in refugees from Gaza, it exposes them. It exposes them as being client states, as being cozy with Israel, in effect. So they have resisted so far. But Netanyahu has said, and Trump is going along, we're going to starve people. We're going to make them so miserable that they're going to want to leave, that Jordan and Egypt are going to have to take people in. And that is their cynical, it's just so evil to me that you don't allow food. And I have to say this for the media. Some of them act like, well, people are hungry in Gaza, and they don't tell you it's because Israel will not allow food to come in. That's why people are hungry. It is Israeli policy. It is U.S. policy to starve people, to say baby formula can't come in, to watch children shrink down to nothing. This is because of U.S. policy. It is the official policy of this country to starve these people, to bomb them mercilessly, to chase people into tent camps and then bomb the tent camps, to allow Israel to target, to assassinate journalists, to assassinate doctors, to bomb hospitals. This is all U.S. policy. But politically, if you oppose that, if you have ambitions like AOC has, now you're in an untenable position. So then you have to play these games with semantics, where I don't want people to die, but I want to protect Israel. Even though I've said it's a genocide, I still want to protect them. And it's nonsensical. But it's, again, this the fact that we have a political system that created this situation.
Yes.
First of all, the U.S., I don't know. The U.S. is equally culpable as Israel. They work together like this. But if you're on allegedly the left, you're not supposed to speak against this or say that Israel has to have this iron dome, which we found out was, not so iron when Iran was attacking Israel, which was fine with me. I don't care if Israel isn't defended. Israel deserves everything it gets. And its people are, for the most part, in support of all their actions. So I don't care if Israel doesn't have an iron dome, or if it's not so iron and has holes in it. I don't care. What they need to get my money. Again, when we're told all the things we need are off the table, there's just so much here to talk about the corruption the reality of how politics in this country works, that at the same time, people are going to be kicked off of Medicaid, but not till after the midterms. You know, these cuts are not going to hit until 2027. So if you think it's so wonderful, why can't it go into effect now? Well, that's because you know it's not wonderful. You know you're going to hurt people. But at any rate, you can't have Medicaid. You can't have SNAP. You can't have school lunch. All these things that human beings need, we're told no. But when it comes to Israel being able to bomb and to kill, the answer is always yes. And you can't run for dog catcher anywhere in this country unless you support this really monstrous regime.
You're absolutely right. Everything that you just said, absolutely correct. I mean, the video that I just showed was a guy fishing and was hit with a sniper. I can show you other videos of people getting killed, children getting burned, tents getting bombed. I mean, like, they are voluminous. And yet they happen every day. And you would think that a functional media, you made the point of saying civilizational. It's that. Your country is allowing a genocide, full stop. And it's something that we can see with our own eyes. It's not like there are ovens hidden somewhere in Poland. This is something that we are watching day after day, where they're killing like 100 people a day in the most horrific of ways. And the media, for one, didn't want to bring it up at first.
Right.
And then when it became so voluminous, it's like, how are you ignoring 30, 50 videos a day of people being massacred? I mean, they raped a guy on TV, and the Israeli public, 60% said fair game.
Yep.
But this is the society we're talking about. This is outrageous. And you pointed out that we're equally culpable. We are more culpable. We pay for it. Israel couldn't do this. Israel wouldn't exist as a state. People act like there's this great military power. Nonsense. They are completely reliant and dependent upon the money that is coming out of the United States to function and to murder as many people as they do. And yeah, Egypt, Jordan don't necessarily want to take them, and instead just going to watch these people starve to death. And it seems like that's the point. We need to kill him. We need to get rid of him. And one of my guests pointed out, he says, you know, I can't believe that they have skeletal children walking around. They have skeletal children walking around. Some of them are on hospital beds. Some of them are charred and burned to death. I watch this stuff every day. And yeah, it's deplorable that this takes place. Like, it's,
and it can only continue. You have to have repression against people who speak out.
Yes.
So that is why you have tenured professors losing their jobs, people being harassed, people being doxxed, members of the press in the UK, in Canada, all over the Western, supposedly democratic world, repression against journalists who expose this evil doing. You cannot have this going on without having repression. So you're going to be kicked out of school, or your school is going to be deprived of money unless you repress the protest. It goes hand in hand. So we have these threats to our rights, the democratic rights, our rights of free speech, have to be squashed. Have to be. Because as you just said, you can't hide it. It's not hidden. We've been watching this for nearly 2 years. And that means people are going to want to speak out. But of course, you have to have a system that keeps people, or tries to keep people, from speaking out. So in the UK, they have the Palestine Action. It's been labeled a terrorist organization. And you can't, if you support them, then you are it's a proscribed organization. So if you write anything against Israel, well, then you're supporting a proscribed organization, allegedly. They don't have to prove it. Look what they've done to Richard Medhurst, arresting him last year, extending his case because they don't have one. Ali Abunimah arrested in, I believe it was Switzerland. In Canada, Eve Engler arrested. And the Zionists make sure that they shut people up, that people know they're going to suffer if they speak out. So this, as long as this goes on, the repression against the rest of us is going to continue. It has to continue because the only way to get away with this is to shut people up, make sure that if you run for office, you're not going to say anything. If you want to write, you're not going to say anything. If you want to go to school, you're not going to say anything. So it impacts us as well. Even if I don't know how you couldn't care, but even if you don't care, you know that we are all being made complicit. But
I have to tell you, it has shocked me. Like, as I've told people, it puts you in touch with reality in a way that, maybe have fanciful ideas of the world. And on that front, I guess it's positive in regards to what can take place. We've decided as a world that there are disposable people who don't matter.
Yep.
And we can watch those disposable people starve and die, or get raped, or get thrown into a cage, or get, they're starving the doctor because they didn't like the fact that he was holding up the hospital because he was trying to give medical care. We've decided that, and that's a question of humanity, meaning that's a test. I would argue on whether humanity should exist or not. It's astonishing to see the scope and scale, and to know that 7 billion, 8 billion people on the planet are watching it, and yet it continues.
Yes, and it's because Palestinians have been dehumanized. First of all, they're not considered white, they're not European, so that automatically makes it easier. They are considered lesser than, not quite human, and that racism gives license to treat them any way that the power structure decides. But the veil has broken, and it's harder and harder for them to defend it. And that's why the repression continues, actually is being ramped up, because people are not being, not silencing themselves anymore. That's why you have to label people anti-Semites, or you've got to dock somebody, make sure they get fired from their job, because as this goes on, the number of people who cannot stay silent is just going to increase. The number of people who say, I can't tiptoe around this anymore. So we're going to have repression here. No, we're not being starved to death, but they're doing everything they can to prevent people, to make life uncomfortable, to punish people who speak up. So we are, in a different kind of way, we are suffering from this as well. But it does show you how most people react in the face of power, in the face of intimidation, that you can just say, well, I feel bad for him, but I can't lose my job. I'm not going to say anything. And so it goes on, and it tells you the weakness. It exposes the undemocratic nature of so-called democracies. It exposes the lack of a strong left movement. It exposes the fact that we have a lot less influence on the state than we want to admit. And this is the end result. These atrocities, war crimes, a genocide. And I want to say something else. We can't let these people who were silent, who suddenly decide to speak up. So the New York Times has been covering for Israel all this time. But then last week, they print something from an Israeli professor. I know genocide when I see it. I didn't need this guy to tell me it's a genocide. I knew that 2 years ago. So nobody needs to pat him on the back or the New York Times on the back and say, they've said it's a genocide. I was saying that. I didn't need any of them to tell me that this was a genocide. So we can't let them get away with this, these Johnny-come-latelys who now want to come out and say what the rest of us have been saying since 2023.
Piers Morgan, perfect example. Piers Morgan, it's like you defend the genocide for a year and a half, and then it's like, hey, maybe they're going a little too far. You think? And shout out to people who lost their jobs over this stuff. Breonna Joy Gray, she got fired from, I think it's The Hill. There were Mehdi Hassan, if I'm not mistaken, got fired from his position. I'm telling you, from somebody who was working in a media organization when all of this started, there was immense pressure to toe a line. And I will tell you, I remember one day after I pointed out that the rape stuff was fake, pointed out that we had a guest that was doing it, the boss lost it, and effectively said, I will fire anybody else who effectively reports honest news on this issue, because the pressure that was coming down on the media in order to basically not call a spade a spade. Yeah, I one day I came in the office, I emptied all of my stuff in the trash can, and I assumed that at some point I was going to get fired. Like, it was that bad in regards to the pressure that was being applied to media organizations and not to the line. It was obviously a genocide. They just didn't want to call it that. Margaret, thank you for this. Always appreciate you joining me.
It's great to be back, and I always have to say, buy my book, Prejudential, Black America and the Presidents. It's a great book.
Check her book out. Also check her out on Black Agenda Report. They have fantastic reporting.
Thank you.
This is just a taste, a medicine dropper of Margaret Kimberly. She is senior columnist and editor for Black Agenda Report, author of Prejudential, Black America and Presidents, and you can find her on Freedom Ride blog. Margaret, is there anywhere else that people can find you, by the way?
That's the best place. blackagendareport.com. This is Wednesday. It's Black Agenda Report Day, the day we publish our articles. And on X, Twitter, Freedom Ride blog. That's where I do most of my work. I also have Patreon, Margaret Kimberly.
Perfect. You have a fantastic day. And by the way, you're here on a special day. This is 200th episode. So I'm glad to be able to have you on this episode.
Really?
Yes. 200 shows.
I love it. I love being able to celebrate with you. Thank you so much.
You have a good one. Be safe. All right. I am going from one great guest to another great guest, especially on this particular day, the 200th episode of the show. Arnaud, you have been a fantastic guest with me for the entire time, and I deeply appreciate you joining me on this day, man. How you doing this morning? Well, evening for you. How are you doing this evening?
Afternoon, actually. I'm doing fine, Jamal. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. Arnaud Develay, he is author, political analyst, international lawyer specializing in international criminal law, and his book, which is extraordinarily relevant today, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of America's Political Consensus. Arnaud, we were talking about this before bringing you on. You pointed out, he was like, this is what my book is about. You said it flat out, this is what my book is about. So Zelensky makes moves on NABU and SAPO. These were organizations that were created immediately after the fall of Ukraine in 2014 when the coup took place. And they were effectively instruments of the US government, FBI, CIA, working through the US Embassy in Ukraine in order to affect and oversee Ukraine. They weren't elected by Ukraine. They weren't in Ukrainian bodies. They were foreign bodies. They were supposedly part of the rationale for Ukraine going into the European Union, which at this point doesn't seem like it's going to take place either way. But the organizations persisted, poorly persisted, because Ukraine is the most corrupt country on the planet. And it's not like the corruption eased up, moved, like change or anything. And yet these organizations continue to exist. What is going on with this? And why is Zelensky all of a sudden making moves to kneecap these organizations and subordinate them to the office of the presidency?
Well, there are two schools of thoughts as to what's going on in as far as today's developments are concerned in Kiev. The first school of thought is to essentially attribute to the Kiev regime the intent on getting under control those organizations which present themselves as anti-corruption and independent from the prosecutor's office, in as far as what has been known for quite some time. Some people have spoken about it going back to 2023. There was an attempt by the Republican then minority in Congress to open an investigation into where did the money go amidst strong rumors that a lot of money was being embezzled. And so now we have a situation where, as it seems that some of the flow of weapons are being somewhat worked out, the gravy train is about to get an injection again, and with the same people getting, being on the take. And I guess the idea is to prevent, to the extent there's a change of political atmosphere in Washington. There are rumors that Zelensky himself might be on the shopping block. And of course, if you've seen the movie Nobody,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, corruption bearing on pilfering funds from your main sponsor is not looked on too kindly. Let's put it this way. So I guess all this motivated Zelensky and his inner circles to move preemptively. And it's interesting because the idea is it's all presented as trying to get American U.S. influence out of the country. So I love it.
Well, they said Russian influence. Zelensky's thing was like,
well, I'm not even gonna go there. I know, it's crazy.
He comes out and makes a video. He says the Russians had infiltrated these organizations.
Yes.
And so he had to raid all, like, I think it was like dozens, like 70 different raids or something like that, in order to get somebody who was leaking information to the Russians.
Traffic tickets. I ain't lying. This is what they were arrested and interrogated for. Traffic tickets. So there's no, of course, Russian influence. As you rightly pointed out in your introduction, those agencies are purely U.S. construct. And they were put into place at the time to set up the narrative in as far as people within, remnants of the old Yanukovych regime who might still be willing to, denounce the new state of affairs. And those agencies were basically set up by Washington to make sure those people were subjected to gag order and taken out of commission, essentially, neutralized, so they would not, be a problem. As they would be solid people on, solid people with whom we could work. To quote Biden.
Give me your take on Trump.
Yeah.
I want your take on this. This is what Trump.
So that's the second school of thought. I'm getting to it. So the second school of thought is that we have this Epstein affair going on, and obviously you got to create a counter flare, right? So the counter flare is what? The counter flare is what we're hearing now, all over the airwaves and podcasts or throughout the internet, which bears on the 2016 interference in the U.S. election, which, as we all know, was trotted out as a collusion, initially a collusion, alleged collusion between then President-elect Trump and the Russians, Russia.
Yep.
And now we know that first we had the Mueller report, which basically this was in spring 2019, conceded that there was no collusion. Then we had the Durham report, which essentially transformed the touchdown through the kick between the two poles, to make sure that and despite those official reports, federal employees, special prosecutor, and all, that trope somehow kept being trotted out in the media.
Yep.
And so and now more than ever before, owing to the Epstein, I think the Epstein thing is really what triggered the White House to somehow revive, and it's a legitimate claim. Because no one was ever brought into account for this,
right?
But so the idea would be also that the Democrats knew about the Epstein. There's also a school of thought that the Democrats knew about everything that's on the Epstein list, and to the extent they're trying now to revive themselves politically by promoting the narrative that Trump might have something to do with it, Trump is obligated to somehow, go after them. There might have been some kind of a Cold War truce. You don't bother me on this, I won't bother you guys on that. But now that you want to go full out on the Epstein, that I'm going after you after Crossfire Hurricane. And this is where we are right now. So it's all connected. The whole thing is connected, and the timing couldn't be more somehow perfect, because it revives something that had been buried. And if anything, Zelensky acting the way he does feeds into this suspicion that there might be still evidence available, in the NABU archives or what have you, which needs to be somehow tidied up. Because the thing is, Zelensky wasn't president yet, but the administration, the bureaucratic apparatus was in place. And so, and we all know that it was not as much Russian interference as Ukrainian interference in the 2016 presidential election. And thus, I think it was the first impeachment born out of the phone call between Trump and Zelensky in late 2019 somehow was a panic-ridden reaction of the Democrats at the time. Because they might have been thinking that, as we were getting close to the 2020 election, they would be found out as having engineered the whole thing in the first place. Let's recall that Giuliani visited Kiev a few times, met with former Ukrainian MP, Andrii Telizhenko, who was the first to alert to this. And now we have this guy, former Servant of the People Party member, Alexander Dubinsky, who still somewhat, it kind of amazes me. Ukraine is a very strange ecosystem. I mean, people disappear. And at the same time, you've got a guy who seems to have a lot of information, who's in jail right now on charges of corruption, but who's still allowed to tweet out of jail. It's pretty strange.
I mean, like he does videos. He does videos.
I know, yeah. So now the guy is saying there's actually more than the 2016. There's actually the 2020 version of the Crossfire Hurricane. So this opens up yet another kind of worm because, it's like the little engine that could, the tree that keeps on giving. Because we also know that the Trump campaign was monitored and surveilled during the 2024 election campaign.
Yep.
So it's a continuing, ongoing crime, where there's no statute of limitation. It starts in 2016, in July 2016, with that Black Ledger concoction, accusing then Trump campaign director Paul Manafort of being on the take from the former, the Yanukovych regime.
Yes.
This was debunked because everybody who allegedly collected had their name next to the amount of monies. And there were signatures of those people, attesting that they received whatever monies. But on the line where Manafort's name is listed, there's no signature. So don't act. I mean, and then we never found.
If I'm not mistaken.
Say what?
Didn't he get jail time for that? I thought he got jail time for that.
Manafort?
Yeah.
Paul Manafort.
To try to go after Trump. They were trying to get a hearing on Trump. And I thought they pinched him for that.
Well, as far as the Ukraine investigation is concerned, they dragged his name in the mud for a while until they realized that it was not politically feasible and it might actually be going a step too far, and that essentially the Russiagate was doing what it was supposed to be doing and some. So there was no need in trying to be rigorous in pursuing somebody of a crime he did not commit. And so they came up with the excuse that Manafort, not being a Ukrainian citizen, was immune from prosecution, which is ridiculous on its face, as if you could somehow invoke immunity on account of your nationality for a crime that you allegedly committed elsewhere abroad. I mean, you visit a place, you are availing yourself to the laws of the country you visit. But this is what they came up with to somewhat evacuate, the whole thing. So, but this is it. This goes back to 2016, but again, it would have never really grown out of proportion and revived itself in such a dramatic fashion as we've seen the last few days, if it wasn't for the Democrats refusing to let the Epstein thing go. So it all starts.
Go ahead. No, please finish. No, I'm
sorry. I was done. Go ahead.
I have a hypothesis. First, I want to get your take on this because you wrote the book on these entanglements. This is Donald Trump, and listen to what he says here. And I want to get your take on and your response.
Biden gave away $350 billion worth of equipment or cash. Worse than equipment, cash. So we want to find out about that someday, I guess, right? But they buy their own equipment. But I have a feeling they didn't spend every dollar on the equipment. But they are gave away $350 billion.
Now, Trump is saying this at the exact same time where they are going after Zelensky for going after an organization that was investigating Zelensky for corruption. So, meaning, in one sense, you have Zelensky who's trying to solidify his political space. And in doing so, he's like, we're going to get rid of these two organizations because of the Russians have infiltrated them. And what people believe in Ukraine and what people have been reporting here is, well, these organizations have started to investigate Zelensky and his circle of people. And so Zelensky decided to make a preemptive move to get rid of him because he didn't want to be investigated because he's guilty of something. Meaning, if I got to get rid of the prosecutor, the first thing people are going to say, why did you have to get rid of the prosecutor, right? Now, from Zelensky's point of view, okay, these are foreign entities. These are not under the auspices of Ukraine. And so if we're having any notion of sovereignty, these organizations need to go. The issue that people are going to have is, why now? Why now? That looks weird. It looks like you're trying to prevent yourself from being prosecuted.
The timing is all wrong, and at the same time, they're not being dissolved. They are being merged into the prosecutor's office. So there somehow is an office within the building which has, NABU and special investigation for corruption stickers on the doors.
Under Zelensky's thumb, which is the issue now. Zelensky
exactly.
Get rid of the case.
Yeah, because he basically appoints. He's the one who appoints the prosecutor, and there's been a few, as we've seen throughout the years. Somebody who wants to really do the job that he was appointed for, to the extent it impinges on U.S. interest or interest of people. Yeah, the guy is gone in no time. So yeah, it's all under control now. But you're right. Basically, there's no constitution that I know of in Ukraine that allows for the creation of something that was created sui generis, essentially. So it's almost like an admission, a tacit admission, that the country is under colonial control, as it were.
Yeah,
this is
I have a hypothesis, and I want to run it by you. I want to get your take on it. So Seymour Hersh puts out an article, and in the article he points out, is this the end of Zelensky? Firing shot. Now, obviously, Hersh is not pulling this out of his ass. Hersh is getting this from some kind of source from the U.S. government that floats this idea that we're going to get rid of Zelensky. All right. Then you immediately get a bunch of other articles that come out effectively saying Zelensky is being authoritarian, Zelensky is a problem, etc. All right. Fast forward, Zelensky says, I need to solidify my political space. So Yermak reshuffles the way the government is organized in order to make sure Zelensky is more solidified in his space. On top of that, Zelensky then, almost within a few days, goes after Nabu and Sapo. Almost immediately, out of the blue, you get all of these protests taking place over Ukraine where they are trashing Zelensky, calling Yermak a dick, saying, we're not idiots. You need to get rid of him.
Nice and neat. Yes.
Yeah, nice and neat. It's precisely nice and neat. Here's another one where they're going out, signs, flags, the works, out of the blue, the moment that you tried to get rid of those organizations. Now, simultaneously, you have a broadside attack on the issue of Russiagate. Now, I don't think these things are unconnected. Donald Trump, let's say for the moment that Donald Trump wanted to make a deal. Let's say that he wants to make a deal. And let's say that he knows that you can't make a deal with Putin. You can't push Putin on this. You don't have any cards. But you do have a rogue, quote unquote, actor in Zelensky that is your proxy that you've been using to try to effectively kill Russians and undermine the Russian state. And you know that he is a problem and impediment to anything that you need to do. And you say to yourself, we need to get rid of him. First firing shot was Seymour Hersh. Next firing shot was the articles that were coming out boosting Seymour Hersh. Third firing shot was these protests where Zelensky effectively ran into headlong by trying to get rid of these organizations. And this is like a Maidan 2.0 where the Trump administration believes that President Putin's deal or wants are maximalists, and within the concerns that Putin actually wants, that there may be some space to negotiate. He sees what's happening on the battlefield. They're getting crushed. Petros is about to fall. Chasiv Yar is about to fall. They don't have the manpower in order to maintain those positions. They see the Patriot missiles getting blown up. They see Germany not having the capability of replacing them. They see Ukraine not having the military, the muscle, the manpower, the weapons to do anything in real substance. And Trump is like, all right, I want to make a deal and I need Zelensky to go. Is it possible that the protests, the attack on Russiagate, the media coordination, articles are coming out boosting the protests, where they're now saying that Zelensky has betrayed Ukraine. You have another one coming out, Kiev Post. We know how to stand up for our rights. Another one coming out of Politico, anger bills in Ukraine. Zelensky signs a law targeting corruption watchdog. And mind you, are we really to believe that all of these people have come out for Sapo and Naboo? How weird. Like these two organizations that I don't even know if Ukrainians fully are cognizant of, but has become the linchpin. We got people being thrown into cars with press vans. We have mothers who've lost their kids, and we're telling you that this is the issue. This is the thing that have galvanized Ukraine to come up. It seems like it's a Maidan 2.0. It seems like they're trying to get rid of Zelensky.
It seems like a perfectly well orchestrated regime change operation. Yes.
Yes. That's what it looks like.
And mind you, two things. When the corruption issue started becoming a thing, right? It was Seymour Hersh on Ansin Rafshani's show going underground. That was in 2023. So we already have Seymour Hersh, and now, as you perfectly summed up, he's being trotted out again. This time with the echo chamber to go with it.
Yes. To
create, this background. And last but not least, and this is something that just came down on the prompter, those Patriot deliveries won't happen until 2026.
That's right. They don't have them. Yeah, they don't have them.
So essentially, the idea is, if there were to be any kind of tacit understanding between Washington and Moscow, the idea would be, you and I need this guy to go. He's been an impediment to any kind of deal. This is, by all account, the consensual analysis in all quarters when it comes down to having somebody willing to somehow play ball and bring the whole thing down, right? At the same time, we need to create the environment so the guy loses his credibility. So militarily speaking, I'll give you the leeway so you do what you need to do on the battlefield. And this is what's happening right now, because the front is literally about to collapse. It might take, another 10 days, 2 weeks. But by all account, this hub of Pokrovsk is about to be enveloped completely. And with it, all possibilities for a significant amount of the front line on the Ukrainian side to be furnished in everything, essentially.
Yeah.
So it smells like the end, essentially. Then now we have, again, as you mentioned, all those articles being trotted out, being picked up and echoed. We have those crowds, rent a crowd. There's even elements of languages bearing on Maidan 2.0. I've seen that.
Yeah.
So it's yes, and as you said, we've had last month, this because let's not underestimate as well the perception metrics on this. It was a disaster for Kiev. The fallen soldiers, the swap,
the exchange where they didn't want to pay the people the money for the death.
That's right. That really hurt Kiev in the war of information. Definitely. We have a guy who's saying that he lost a grand total of 46,000 soldiers, and over a couple of weeks alone, you got about 7,000 soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, being handed over to Kiev. That's about 1/7 of the entire total.
Yeah.
We don't know how many more, tens of thousands more soldiers Russia may actually have on ice. Also, we'll find out today because they are meeting to probably discuss about the same issues. Since the current Ukrainian delegation has no authority to discuss any other issue than humanitarian prisoner swaps and swapping over of dead soldiers. So this is it. I think this is the end of the line. And usually when we deal about the corruption, as far as Washington is concerned, and the guy is trying to go out of his way and suppress, when you have a fever, what do? You break the thermometer. That's what you do. But this is U.S. property. Those NABU and affiliates agencies, you don't touch that. We put that in place for a reason. So I don't know who advised him to do that. It might have been coming from Washington, but from a faction that's not in charge right now. Or maybe the idea was to allow him to think that he could get away with it, a little bit like they did with Saddam in April 1990.
I just thought he was.
Can I go into Kuwait and pay myself in real, since the Kuwaiti don't want to pay for my 8-year war with Iran? Sure, no problem, Saddam. You are boys. We got your back. Those Bedouins. And they treated your women, they called your women prostitutes. Yeah, you can go to Kuwait City and just help yourself. And boom, we know what happened afterward, right?
Yeah.
So it's like this all over again to me. I mean, just quite a
I didn't
stupid
even
move.
think about that. I kept thinking in terms of Zelensky was like, okay, they're trying to get rid of me. I need to solidify my politics, my political space. And so I need to get rid of these organizations that are from Washington. I need to reshape my government. I didn't even think of somebody saying, hey, man, those organizations are fair game. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Because, but if there was anybody who was sticking in Washington, they might have said, investigate Zelensky. And the moment that he finds out about it, he's like, I need to stop them from doing that.
It's going to take too long. That's the problem. The guy's got to go like yesterday.
Yeah.
We all agree on that. So they need this kind of regime change, or at least this internal tinkering to take place and to take place fast. So we may see a palace coup, essentially. And they've got Zelensky waiting in the wings.
But see, that's the other question that I have. If Zelensky does go, let's say they find a way to get rid of him, you still have this kind of Banderite political structure. Meaning it's not just Zelensky, it's all of them. That's the issue. They got rid of the political opposition. They've been putting people in prison left and right. I'm surprised Klitschko is not in prison at this point. Who else would take over? That's what I'm confused about. And would that person have the political latitude to accept? Because from my point of view, let's say that Putin demands are maximalist, which I think they're reasonable. But Putin may say, in my mind, there's a certain amount that I'm willing to accept, that I'm willing to make a deal with, that we can negotiate within certain things as long as I get my core things accomplished. So the deal that I'm making or what I'm putting out is maximalist demands, but I'm willing to accept something less. And Trump, they may have had honest conversations where Trump is like, look, man, I don't care about this.
Make me look good, but let's put an end to this. Yes, exactly. Make me look like, I resolved the problem.
Right. And let me say
exactly. And this is what happened because Putin said what? Putin said, ceasefire, fine. You want a ceasefire? You withdraw all Ukrainian troops unilaterally from all of the 4 oblasts.
Right.
This is where we stood.
And
then we would have a ceasefire. He said he would.
Well,
yes, he said it himself.
Well, let me say this.
You want a ceasefire? No, he wants, this is the red line. You unilaterally pull all of your troops out of the 4 oblasts that are now Russian Federation territories. You will have your ceasefire, and then we can sit down and start discussing substantive matters.
But would a Ukrainian president, or let's say if Zelensky...
But Zelensky doesn't want it. Zelensky wants the continuation, yes.
But would somebody else who came behind Zelensky be able to do that? That's my point.
He'll be briefed. He'll be briefed.
Yeah,
that's the price of getting kicked.
They're saying they're going to kill him, right? They're going to whack the guy. That's what I mean.
That's conditional on the incoming replacement to basically agree with this. Yeah, and Zelensky is a military man. He understands that there's no point in continuing this. So I think politically, it's viable for him to take act of a situation militarily, which as a military man he can only but integrate in his in his political positioning on this. Not to mention, we all know that, you know, everybody in Ukraine and their mother wants this whole thing to stop, to end, right? No more, you know, grabbing people off the street, you know. So,
but you don't think Zelensky would get whacked if he tried to do this? Like if Zelensky came in and says, all right, I'm going to be more amenable. I want to end this conflict. I accept that those 5 regions are Russian territory. You really think that he could do that?
Well, there might be plans as we speak to accompany Zelensky being brought in with a few targeted assassinations to make sure some of the most radical far right.
Oh, a red wedding, night of the long knives.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just wow. You mentioned that it looks like the front is collapsing in the cross. I've been watching some of the videos coming out of that. That is amazing. I mean, Ukraine doesn't seem to have the manpower to
6 kilometers in one day.
Yeah.
The last 24 hours, yes. So they're wrapping it up. They're huge, two huge cauldron. You know, essentially that's game over right there. Because if you don't do a ceasefire, if you don't conclude a ceasefire right now, the Russians are gonna just zoom their way through the Dnieper. So it's gonna be politically. You have a window now. If you're the Trump administration, you have a window to somehow extricate yourself from this, you know, without, you know, your political capital being eaten into. But if you wait too long, you know, you kind of like hesitate, you might miss that window. Yeah, it's now. Now we're still, I think, in that paradigm where, you know, what I quoted earlier, what I referred to earlier on this ceasefire paradigm, this condition, unilateral withdrawal from the 4 oblasts.
Right.
Then we have a ceasefire, and then we start talking. And you can keep your regime in place, which is the main thing. They want to keep the regime. They will give it a makeover. Well, for the time being, it seems like they would entertain this idea that yes, because the idea is to get those 4 oblasts internationally recognized in the text, in the international text. Remember this, it never was about taking the whole of Ukraine. Now, if you don't understand this fundamental red line and you're, you know, somehow hoping to pull victory out of the jaws of defeat, we will keep proceeding apace, and you won't be in a position where we're talking about 4 regions, but 6 regions, if not 8 regions.
Yeah, but I guess my thing is
it's now or never, I think, in terms of
a deal. Yes. But if you're keeping the Banderite government in place, don't you still have the same problem? I mean, these guys are effectively Nazis in many respects. I mean, some of these people are lunatics.
It depends. The devil is in the detail. I mean, there might be, you know, elements of negotiation we will never know about, bearing on getting rid of some of the most radical people.
Yeah.
The heads of battalions, you know. And Zelensky, once Zelensky is installed, he will purge the current cabinet of Zelensky. Obviously, all those people are radioactive, so he's going to have to get rid of them. Some of them will be found dead in their bed. Others will be somehow, you know, disappeared and to reappear in Moscow in a courtroom. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you cannot start doing anything of substance unless you change the head. That's the bottom line.
And do you think that's what's happening? They're effectively changing the head.
Well, the writing is on the wall. The writing is on the wall as we have visited today. Yes, it's all there. Because this would not have been possible, you know, as you said. I mean, Ukrainian regulars are more concerned about their loved ones and trying to survive and escape the forced enrollment, you know. Mm-hmm. And out of the blue, you find yourself. I mean, this is very neatly organized protest. Now, I guess the litmus test is going to see if those protests are prolonged over time. If they are and turn into a Maidan 2.0, as we're hearing, then it will confirm what we're talking about. This is the test now. If it's just a yellow vest once a week on a Saturday afternoon, like we've seen in France, that's not gonna do it. You need a continued presence, intensifying presence, until it becomes with a crowd that grows ever larger. Then you have something. We'll see.
I guess we'll see. I mean, they're starting with a template, and I guess the thought is other people are going to join with their own issues. I mean, because if you're a mom and your kid was killed, okay, you may go out and protest. You're pissed off. Or if you were,
that would be the perfect platform to get other people with their own respective issues to come and join, and
exactly.
In so doing, enlarge the protest. Yes.
Wow, just wow! I just out the blue. That is amazing. From the battlefield conditions, though, do you see them acquiescing? Like, meaning the way that the Ukrainian military, for the most part, is being taken apart in these areas. Do you see this government ever negotiating in real faith, or it's just impossible for them to do that? I mean, because you would think that if you're having a battlefield collapse, that you would be more inclined to negotiate to stop the battlefield collapse. And as you say, maintain your presence as a government. But I don't see this government doing that.
No, because they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't, because that corruption graft issue is not going to go away. And so right now, the only lifeline they have to avoid having to face retribution for that is to carry out and wage and send people to die to a certain death, essentially, under the pretense that they have those wonder weapons or whatever crap they come up with to try to say, there's hope in what we're doing.
Has Putin responded to Trump's ultimatum? I don't remember. I don't think he did. I haven't seen anything coming out of him.
No, I mean, because it's all Trumpology. That's what I call Trumpology. The Russians don't get caught up in this is for internal consumption. The only thing that matters to them is what, we have a third round of negotiation in Istanbul started today. We want concrete results through negotiation. If we can bring some of our boys back. Right now, that's the only concrete thing we're looking at. The Americans know our positions. They know where we stand. We've been clear. We've repeated them. There are things below which we will not even sit down. And so things are pretty clear. I mean, the Russians are very consistent.
They have been.
Do you see? You have to hear and listen to what they say.
Do you see any movement in these negotiations at all? Like, do you have any expectations of anything beyond prisoner exchange, body exchange?
Not unless the Zelensky situation is resolved. It's always been the problem from the get-go.
Right. Wow.
He is the impediment, to a ceasefire, because that's his war. His whole political legacy, if not his own persona, is identified with that ridiculous conflict. Tragically ridiculous, but tragic. And so that's his one trick pony. That's what he does. And to the extent he either entertains conceding military defeat, or go all the way and destroy the country and him with it. That's not, at some point he has handlers and sponsors, who might want to fight another day, and they need things to somehow, for now, be frozen. And this is we might see that some kind of. Then we'll get into the issue of NATO countries, expanding peacekeepers. That will be another ferocious negotiation, but we're not there yet. Right now, the main thing is to get a ceasefire, and the Russians have been clear on their position.
One last question on the Zelensky front. I get the sense that the European leaders are backing Zelensky, meaning they want him to stay there because they want Ukrainians to continue to stay and die. Whereas Trump may not want, meaning Trump, what they want may be different. Trump wants a deal because he wants to feed his ego. Europe wants to keep them fighting and dying, almost like a staying maneuver, so they can build up their own militaries and everything else. It seems
they have much to lose politically if he's allowed to do anything he wants that crosses his mind on between two lines of coke. So if we get a ceasefire, they are able to somehow save face in their own respective countries.
You mean the Europeans?
Yes,
but see, I got the sense that the Europeans wanted to keep this going. Everything that they've said up to this point, I don't believe for a moment that Europe has the capability of putting 50,000 troops in Ukraine.
No, I think And we discussed that once before, and on this very point. And I said their default position is to tell Zelensky, keep fighting, anything you need, we'll manage to get it for you. Right. Because they are not driving the political process. They're not talking to the Russians, so they're not negotiating over the head of Zelensky. The only one who is negotiating is Trump, the American master. So if anything, they wish that there can be something, you know, that would, because militarily, I mean, they will find themselves on the same line as Zelensky. Yes. Because they've tied their political fate to him.
But I guess my point is they're saying that in order to keep the Russians fighting. The Russians are never going to accept the premise of European troops in Ukraine. But they will say
they will, yeah, but they will try. They will gesticulate. But like I said, we'll see what happens. You know, this will be yet, you know, another component of that substantive negotiation process. Right now, the main thing is to get a ceasefire.
Yeah,
acceptable for both sides. So we have a platform upon which we can start discussing substantive issues. Because right now, Istanbul is, you know, like I said, humanitarian issues only.
Fantastic spot. A really great breakdown. I really appreciate this. Thank you for this. Arnaud Develay, he's an author, political analyst, international lawyer, specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of America's Political Consensus. It seems very apt right now, considering what's taking place. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay? You have a good day.
Thank you, Jamal.
Bye-bye. All right. That was a fantastic breakdown. Fantastic breakdown. And I'm glad Arnaud could join me on the 200th show because he's been a great guest for the last, 200 shows. Oh, that is fascinating. We'll see if this is the final days of Zelensky or if Zelensky can somehow maintain his political power and whether or not these protests grow. I mean, the template is there. So the catch becomes, do other people start coming out? And do you get grass growing over the astroturf? That is a good question. I don't have an answer for that question. I suppose that's going to be a question or an answer provided in the future. How many well-paid people you have going out with signs, angry, cantankerous, screaming at you? And how long can your government, which is probably an unpopular government, maintain while you're also fighting on the front lines and losing with bad press coming out of those front lines? Good question. Good question. Ritter may be right about this. This might be one of those times where Ritter is right, that either you walk out with a bag of money and go to Paris, or you don't walk out at all and you end up hanging on a flagpole. We will see. But I have another damn good guest today. We're going to go to another part of the world. I'm waiting for him to sit down. I'm not going to put him on the spot where nobody sees him. KJ No. KJ No is joining us. And just for you to know, KJ No is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region. He is contributor to the book, Capitalism on a Ventilator, which you can get at iacenter.org. KJ also, there we are, is on Breakthrough News. He has the show China Report. And I saw you on a video with Brian Berletic talking about military, like one of the largest military testing, or let's say, what's the word I'm looking for? The largest military exercises that were taking place in, I think it was South China Sea, but I could be wrong on the exact location. How you doing, KJ? You doing okay this morning?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I am doing well. I'm better that you're joining me. I appreciate you for joining me. I sent you, initially when I first sent the email, I didn't send the actual quote. Unfortunately, I did follow it up with it when I realized that I didn't send the quote the first time around. Did you have an opportunity to see the quote? Because there's so much that's being attributed to China. Every day there's Xi Jinping says this, China says this. And it's like, I've gotten kind of like you. It's like, okay, that doesn't really sound like China. that doesn't give you the Chinese feel of what they would say. They were talking about Gaza, effectively saying we can't allow this to keep going on. And it's like, okay, well, China hasn't been that boisterous on this issue. They've said that they don't like it. They've complained, but they haven't necessarily came in like we're going to invade. Gaza if this keeps going on. That's why I sent it to you first. I wanted to get your take on it.
Well, I see this as a systematic psyop that's going on. They're going to continually attribute statements to China, both positive and negative and everything else in between. And then they're waiting for China to, respond. And as soon as they respond, they're going to jump on it. So I wouldn't pay any attention.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like every day it would be a picture of Xi Jinping and it would be like, we're going to punch America in the nose if America doesn't do something. It's like, okay, that doesn't sound like China. I'm being over the top, but it's on everything. And it's so weird. It's like on one issue after the next. It's just very bizarre.
So, like I said, it's probably a deliberate psyop. I mean, let's think this through. If you say Xi Jinping is going to punch China in the nose and then China denies it, then you're going to have half of the people who still say, China has threatened the United States and says they're going to punch U.S. in the nose. They'll run with that. And the other half will be people like, why the F doesn't China punch the U.S. in the nose?
Right.
Are they?
Right. No, that's a good point. That is a good point. Yeah, I've gotten to the point saying, okay, China doesn't sound that way. So, yes. You did a video with Brian Berletic, and you pointed out that the United States was holding some of the largest military exercises, basically against China, that you've seen. Dig into that for me. I mean, because I don't get the sense that the U.S. is in a position for war currently. And it seems like Trump doctrine has been more so, we're going to feed people to other countries. So we're going to feed Israel to the Iranians. We're going to feed the Europeans, or the Ukrainians at this point, then the Europeans to the Russians. We're going to feed Australia, South Korea, and Japan to the Chinese. Like, meaning it doesn't seem like the United States is in any position for war. It has been able to pivot into Asia in any real particular fashion. And from the Chinese point of view, waiting seems to be in their best interest because they can build up a large military the larger they wait. What's going on, though? I mean, do you think they're really going to get to the point of saying we need to pull the trigger now because waiting is not in our interest, even if we don't have the best shot of doing this? What are your thoughts?
Well, the U.S. has actually calendared a date for war with China.
2027.
2027, or more accurately, somewhere between 2025 and 2027. This probably comes out of a study. This timing has probably come out of a study done by RAND in 2016, where they said that, after 2025, it gets harder and harder for the United States to prevail in a conflict. So that time window is driven by the United States, not by China. There are allegations that China said they're going to attack Taiwan on 2027. Absolute, complete nonsense. There's no record of any Chinese leader having said anything of that type. So I recommend that, if people are curious about China's statements, go to the foreign ministry of the PRC, FMPRC, something. Look it up and, get it from the horse's mouth, not from Western propaganda sources. But this whole notion, the U.S. is currently in this process of, as Brian Berletic says, strategic sequencing and division of labor. It wants to tie Russia down in Europe. If it ties Russia down in the Ukraine in Europe, then that prevents Russia from doing other things that are supportive of the global South. So it's literally a pin. That piece is pinned. It cannot move or do anything else. The U.S. has already pivoted to Asia. There's 60% of its air and naval forces are already in Asia, and they continue to escalate. And most recently, they did the department level exercises. These are exercises that have not been seen in a generation. If you look up department level exercises, you won't see anything on it because they haven't done them since the invention of the internet. That's how old this stuff is. Most recently, they did exercise, and it's the DLEs are still ongoing, but it's literally the entire department of the branch of the army that is doing a coordinated exercise. Okay, so you have company level exercises, deployment exercises, field training exercises, brigade, division level exercises. You even have Army Corps exercises or Army exercises. This is bigger than all of them. This is the entire department of that branch of the Army doing a combined exercise. It's unheard of in the modern era. It hasn't been done, since the internet has been invented, which is why you'll find almost nothing on it. So you have department level exercises going on between the Air Force and the Space Force. So two departments working together. And then you have Talisman Sabre happening in the Pacific, primarily centered around Australia, but with 19 other countries involved, 30 plus thousand troops, and rehearsing for aggressive war. And then you have the Hanguang exercises happening on Taiwan Island itself. And this time they're rehearsing with HIMARS, etc. So very, very aggressive. These exercises are twice as long as they were before, much, much more intense. The tempo and the intensity and the scale and the scope of these exercises is quite mind-boggling. And we don't see much about these exercises, which means that it's more and more dangerous. It's like when the dog stops barking, that's when it's going to bite. So these kinds of exercises are very, very ominous. Especially, I was discussing this with Brian. I had Brian on my show yesterday, Brian Boletic on my show yesterday. We're discussing this. We've been through military exercises, and we know what they're like when they're done in peacetime, which is often a kind of check the box exercise. They're horrible. They're destructive. They're destructive of the environment, of people. They're incredibly destructive. But even so, you can tell the difference between the exercises that are done in peacetime and the exercises that are actually done in wartime or are part of an ongoing escalation to war. Let me just give you an example.
Yeah.
I think we may have discussed this before. South Korea has been conducting military exercises with the United States nonstop. Certainly during the Yoon Suk-yeol administration, it was almost nonstop. 270 plus days of military exercises.
Wow.
Before that, it would be 1 or 2 months. At most, 2.5 months. Now, 270 days of military exercises. And the pace and the tempo of these exercises so intense is that they did a live bombing exercise a few months ago. Already, the live bombing thing is a recipe for catastrophe. And they bombed a local village, and they damaged or destroyed 152 houses. 152 houses, people going about their ordinary lives, residential houses, churches, senior centers, etc. Well, what happened here? This is the kind of thing that happens in war. That is collateral damage, right? Friendly fire incidents. And it happens because the targeting is happening so rapidly that it's essentially indiscriminate. So you're seeing these kinds of incidents in the war games, which means that they're not typical war games. They are actually direct rehearsal for war. I could give many other examples. The US has been also rehearsing the capturing and transfer of prisoners of war. Now, that's something you never do in a war game. I mean, it's the last thing you do. Prisoner of war transfer is almost at the very bottom of the list of the things that you would do in preparedness for war. But the fact that they got to the bottom of the list tells you how intense, how detailed, how granular and how tremendously, accelerated these exercises are. So I think we have to pay very, very close attention to it. The less you hear about these war exercises, it means the more they're being escalated. They go silent before, they bite.
I get the sense, though, that the United States didn't trust South Korea. And I have to wonder if they don't trust them for a reason. Meaning, Yoon Suk-yeol tried to overthrow the South Korean government, which I imagine the U.S. looked at that, as you said, very quietly, didn't have much to say about the fact that he was doing it. And on some level, I guess, wanted to send troops into Ukraine because they can make the argument, well, North Korea is in Ukraine, so we have control of South Korea. But on the other sense, if indeed they were trying to initiate some kind of war, then they would want control of the South Korean military. If they believe that South Korea was a willing participant in this, then what would be the point of overthrowing South Korea's government? I guess what I'm asking you is it possible that many of these states aren't willing actors? That, yeah, we'll do the exercises, yeah, we'll go through the motions, but all things being equal, when it comes down to it, and we need to feed you to the Chinese, they don't trust these governments to fall in line. Or what are your thoughts? That's fanciful thinking.
Not at all. I think that's a pretty good analysis, but it's not so much the governments. The governments are under tremendous pressure. Now, let me caveat that by saying that currently there is Lee Jae-myung, who wants to balance against the United States. He wants to balance with China, or balance to China. So he is probably not going to be a willing participant in a U.S. war against China. In fact, one of the things that we're starting to hear is a demand for the return of operational control of South Korea's troops to South Korea. If you recall, in a previous interview, we discussed the notion of OPCON. The U.S. has operational control over South Korea's military. It's had it since 1950. In fact, in the almost 80 years, less than 75 years that South Korea has had a military as a, quote, sovereign state, it has had control over its own military for only about 13 months. The rest of the time, it has been under U.S. operational control. U.S. tries to, kind of put a fig leaf on it by saying, oh, we don't have full operational control. We only have wartime operational control. That's a nonsense statement. It's like saying we only control the car when it's being driven. We only control it when it's on the road. You get to control it when it's in the garage. No, you're not. It's not your car. You're just the maintenance people. If you're just, if the only control you have of it is when it's in the garage. So South Korea is trying to get back OPCON. The South Korean people certainly don't want to be fed to the wood chipper. And the U.S. is very, very unhappy about the new Lee Jae-myung government. In fact, one of the high-ranking former U.S. diplomats recently went to South Korea. His name is Morse Tan, and he alleged that that Lee Jae-myung, the new president, had stolen the election with and by and on behalf of China, and that essentially it's a Chinese government. And then he, said a lot of defamatory things about the president himself. And so you can see that there's a sector of the ruling elite that are very, very determined to see if they can bring down Lee Jae-myung and his government. So we have to watch that carefully. But Yoon Suk-yeol, the previous president who was recently impeached, was an absolute and total lackey. There was nothing he could not do for the United States. I mean, he went to the White House and sang American Pie. I mean, you can't get more of a minstrel than that. It's absurd. So he was in the pocket. But remember, if you go to war, you need money, you need appropriations. And the opposition party was controlling the legislature. So if they had gone to war, even with the U.S. having operational control over South Korea's military, and there is very, very good evidence, very, very good evidence that Yoon Suk-yeol or at least his military commanders, had a plan to trigger war with North Korea. In fact, we're almost 100% certain that they would have triggered a war, and then the U.S. would have gained operational control because it's quote unquote war. But you would still need the appropriations from the legislature to fund the military unless you have martial law. Once you have martial law, you take over the legislature, then you have everything. You control the appropriations. The U.S. controls the military. The U.S. controls Yun. And then voila, you have not only 500,000 highly trained troops with the best equipment and the best technology, but you also have 3.1 million other Korean reservists who can be drawn up for battle. And South Korea is one of the largest military manpower capacity in the world. It's one of the few countries that has a very, very active draft, and it has 3.6 million troops that can be thrown into the wood chipper. That's a lot of wood, right? That will jam up the wood chipper. So I think that was the plan. Now, one of the things that has just very recently come out, and it's very interesting, small thing, you won't hear about it anywhere else, but it turns out that one of the intelligence commanders who was involved in planning the coup went to Taiwan just before the coup planning happened. And according to the Hanyare, which is a Korean newspaper, they said that he was getting Taiwan's support for the military coup before it happened. And this actually did happen. As soon as the military coup happened, the Taiwanese DPP immediately, they came out in favor and said, yes, this is a good thing. Bravo, Korea, go martial law, go military dictatorship. So there's a kind of, you can see this kind of reconstitution of this axis of fascism between South Korea and the Taiwan fascists that was very, very much a global factor in the 1960s, 1970s, even up to the 1980s. Remember, Taiwan was the epicenter of a platform of right-wing fascism, and it was also the subcontractor for U.S. dirty wars around the world. It was the supporter of Israel. It was the supporter of South Africa. It supported anything that was dirty, illegal, and so dirty and so illegal that even the CIA had to wash its hands of it. That is what Taiwan Island, the ROC government did. Do you recall Air America?
Yes.
Air America was the
radio station.
No. That's another. Air America was the CIA's private airline.
Oh, okay.
Right. It was the CIA's private airline, and it's one of the ways that they trafficked drugs out of the Golden Triangle into Europe and around the world. This is how they funded the dirty wars and the ongoing wars in Southeast Asia through drugs. Air America was technically, it was the civil airline of the Taiwan government, of the ROC government.
Wow.
It was their airline. So these ties go back very long and very closely. Also, when the U.S. ran the Iran-Contra affair, it was Iran-Contra affair was run out of the World Anti-Communist Congress, and that was also centered on Taiwan Island. And of course, the dirty wars against Latin America. In the United States, you had the School of the Americas, but in Taiwan Island, which was almost a finishing school for the torturers and the death squads, this was held in Taiwan. So this was the Peitu Political Warfare Academy, military cadres warfare academy, and the U.S. would send its death squads to Taiwan to get the military training in counterinsurgency, essentially, terrorizing the population. So people like Roberto d'Orbisson were trained in Taiwan Island, and if you talk to people who went there, they say, well, what did we learn? We learned unbridled cruelty. So you can see there's a kind of axis of fascism. The Ukrainian fascists were also supported by the World Anti-Communist Congress on Taiwan Island. So the Israelis were supported by the ROC, the Taiwanese, etc. So there's a kind of a congealing of these underground networks of global reaction and fascism. And one recent example is South Korea's intelligence chief going to Taiwan and notifying that he's going to initiate a military coup before anybody else knew. So you can see that there's an underground coordination.
So we're talking about the Philippines, South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, effectively, as a way of trying to surround China. Does China have any allies in the region? I mean, North Korea will probably assist, I think, but is there anyone else in the region that is either neutral or
Russia? Well, certainly Russia is a strong ally, and remember, China has thousands of miles of border with Russia. So Russia and China are strong allies. Certainly, China has a formal military alliance with North Korea. So war on North Korea, a war that uses North Korea as a trigger, is also a war with China. And it's also a war with Russia because North Korea has a mutual defense treaty with Russia. So China has, China doesn't do military alliances. The only military alliance it has, the only mutual defense treaty it has, is with North Korea. That
effectively kicks off a world war at that point.
It effectively kicks off a world war, which the South Koreans don't want because, North Koreans and South Koreans are simply family. It's an artificial division that was created by the United States, just as the United States divided Vietnam into North and South, that it's divided, all these countries into, split versions that are supposed to be fighting itself. Pakistan is a strong ally. Cambodia is a strong partner, etc. So all over Southeast Asia, China has strong partners, but they're not so much military allies as they are economic partners, countries that they have comprehensive strategic agreements. Sometimes they have strong party-to-party relations, for example, between the CPC and the CPV, etc. But it's the game board is much looser and more heterodox than we imagine it to be. As I've said before, these are weak connections, but they're like the weak hydrogen bonds of water. Water can be very powerful, but it's not, congealed as ice. It's currently in its liquid state.
What is the fault lines with these countries? I get Taiwan. Effectively, they wanted to be the real China, despite the fact that they're a tiny island off the coast of this massive landmass. I get Taiwan. Philippines, the Japanese. I guess the Japanese, the issue goes back to the Second World War also, where they effectively lost to China. And I guess the United States military occupying. But I don't. Am I wrong in getting the sense that, explain the fault lines to me. I'll just ask the question flat out. With the Philippines, is it a land issue where they're arguing over a particular, I know there's like a shoal that they were arguing over. Is that shoal really enough to get the Philippines into a war over Taiwan? Or is whatever Japan and China had going back historically, is that really enough for them to get into a fight over Taiwan? Meaning, it's one thing if you and I have an issue. It's another thing if somebody else has an issue that I am joining in on. The joining in on is weirder especially if it doesn't necessarily affect the issue that I have with you directly. But it seems like all of these countries are willing to join in on something that doesn't affect them directly. It's just odd.
Well, I mean, the first distinction I'll make is that it's not that the countries themselves want to join in, but that they have captured leadership. So South Korea, not so much right now. We'll see how long Lee Jae-myung can resist and whether he can be corralled into being, a subaltern.
Yeah.
But certainly Japan and the Philippines have captured leaders. Regarding the Philippines, some people say that this has to do with Bongbong Marcos. He's the son of the dictator of the Philippines, Ferdinand Marcos. And Ferdinand Marcos, was a kleptocratic dictator who was in the pocket of the United States. And there are probably tens, hundreds of billions of wealth that had been squirreled away in the US and elsewhere that is currently under some kind of, control that Bongbong Marcos would like to get back. So he may have a reward waiting in store, or it may be on the way anyway, if he goes to war against China. The thing to notice is, the Philippines is an incredibly impoverished country. It has a life expectancy which is shorter than North Korea, despite being
Really?
Yes. And if you go to Manila or any of the urban slums in the Philippines, you'll understand why. So its life expectancy is shorter than North Korea's, despite having a GDP which is about 100 rankings higher than North Korea. So it's in a very, very bad state. It needs to do what China is doing, which is, lift up its people and pivot towards a peace economy. But no, they're going along with the US agenda for war. The trigger point or the flash point is the South China Sea. And the Philippines have concocted this fraudulent claim to islands in the South China Sea based on essentially either colonial claims, that is, they claim that they claim what the colonists claim, or more recently, there was a Filipino adventurer who saw some uninhabited islands in the South China Sea, and he claimed that those islands were his on the basis of this colonial doctrine called terra nullius, meaning, it's uninhabited land, therefore it's mine. I declare it. And he declared himself a sovereign state in the South China Sea called he referred to it as Freedom Land. He called it Freedom Land. He said, I'm the king of Freedom Land. It's, it's like something out of, the Little Prince or something. It's kind of absurd. But what the Philippine government did was they arrested him because he was impersonating a Filipino government as well. And then they forced him to sell Freedom Land to them for $1. And so, and that is the Filipino claim to the South China Sea, or those particular islands of the South China Sea. The thing is, and this is really important, Jamal, to understand, is that the Filipino claims these islands based on partially EEZ claims, the exclusive economic zone claims, which extend 200 kilometers out from the shore of the country. And this is a regime which comes out of the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, which was ratified in the 1990s. Really important thing to understand is that UN Close was really captured by the Western imperial states, and it was written in such a way as to preserve the power and privilege of the colonial states. So as the world was decolonizing and the colonial states were starting to lose these large colonies that they had in the global South, Indochina, Africa, the Caribbean, etc., they pushed through this agenda on UNCLOS, which said that countries had vast ocean territories. And so because of that, the colonial powers, despite retreating from the land, and they still have colonies, the French still have, the dom-tom, etc. They still have colonies abroad, but they had to give up. They had to give up most of those colonies. They no longer control Indochina, right? But what they did was they created a regime whereby the small colonies they continue to hold become the holders of vast amounts of ocean territory. And so which country has the largest EEZ on the planet?
Yes, me, I would imagine Philippines, if this is the context of the conversation we're having. Or Taiwan.
Not quite, but archipelagic states generally tend to have large EEZs. The country with the largest EEZ is France. France has the largest.
Are you serious?
I'm not kidding. Yeah, I mean, you look at France; it has a tiny little strip along the Atlantic and the Mediterranean. That's the coastline that it has. But if you actually look at the EEZ claims that France has, it has the largest EEZ on the planet. So
interesting.
It's probably somewhere on the range of, I think 11 million square kilometers. Okay. And then after
that's outrageous. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Please continue.
So after that is the United States, and the United States has a massive EEZ. Why? Because it controls these tiny, tiny islands in the Pacific. But these tiny islands give it vast control, or the vast claims to the ocean. So these are like little pebbles in the ocean, but it gives it vast control over the Pacific. And then China is way down the line. It is probably like 1/10 of the EEZ claims that France has. So, China is not even in contention. But the thing to understand is that the EEZ regime is really, in my opinion, and I think I can back it up, it was really a way for the Western colonial powers to continue to control the planet. But instead of controlling the planet, they control it through ocean territory. That is, if you control the oceans, this is Alfred Thayer Mahan, he who controls the oceans controls the world. And this is the notion: sea power dominates the land. If we can control the sea, we can control the planet. And so you can see how this regime of decolonization simply shifted into other domains. That is, colonization through economic means, through the financial system, through the World Bank, the IMF, etc., by putting all the colonial countries into debt, and then by controlling the ocean, in particular the ocean choke points. So the British still claim the Indian Ocean for themselves, because they have some small islands. For example, the Chagos Islands, they kicked out the Chagos Islanders, and then now they claim that entire region for themselves. And then when the Chagos Islanders want to come back, they say, look, not only is it our territory, but we've deserved it. We've designated it as a nature preserve, and therefore no humans can exist on here. So get away, you can't come back, although it's fine for our soldiers and ships and, warships to be there. That doesn't affect, the nature preserve. So anyway, we have to understand this. Here's the other thing to understand is, there's something that the West, or the rules-based international order, calls freedom of navigation.
Right.
Okay. Now, there's actually no such thing called freedom of navigation per se in international law. The U.S. uses freedom of navigation as a way of doing gunboat diplomacy. It drives ships up and down, the South China Sea, through the Taiwan Strait, which is technically internal waters. And they say, look, we're just doing freedom of navigation. We're just, we're doing what the law allows us to do, which is to fly, sail, and go anywhere we want to. Okay. Now that is nonsense. It's literally like showing colors and firing weapons as you drive through a neighborhood. It's designed to intimidate. It is a gunboat diplomacy. But this whole notion of freedom navigation derives not, it's not set. Because, as I said, there's no such thing as freedom of navigation. There's something called innocent passage, which means you get to walk through briskly, minding your own business, but you certainly don't get to wave arms or drive
military warships.
You get to cruise in an intimidating fashion. You get to pass through quickly, but the way that they have conceived this notion of freedom of navigation comes out of an older, doctrine called mare liberum, which means free oceans, and this was opposed to the previous notion, which was mare nostrum, which means our oceans. There was a kind of debate between people who claimed that this is our ocean and the corporate lawyers, actually, for a Dutch corporation, as it's a man called Grotius, and he claimed that there's a concept called mare liberum, which means that the oceans are free. And they're free because God provided them to everybody. And once a ship is on the ocean, because the wind blows in all directions, this is a sign that God wants you to go everywhere and anywhere. Therefore, the oceans are free. So that's the theory. But the actual reason for declaring mare liberum was that Grotius was hired as a corporate lawyer for the Dutch, and the Dutch had seized a Portuguese carrack, a Portuguese ship, and essentially it was an act of piracy. They had pirated the ship, taken it over, and the Portuguese had complained, and then they'd gone to court, and the Dutch had argued because the Portuguese ship was on, was on the free oceans, it belonged to anybody, and therefore our act of piracy.
Oh, they were arguing that piracy was okay, not the contrary. Okay. Oh, interesting. Okay, I thought you were going the other way with this, that the oceans were fair game. Okay, they're arguing, hey man, we were able to take this because anything that's on the oceans is fair game. They were fair game. Yeah, see, I was going to agree, believe it or not, I kind of agree with that. Like, even in the Philippines thing, if you can defend it, it's yours. Meaning the U.S. can go with an idea of gunboat diplomacy, but if China blows it out the water and the U.S. can't necessarily defend it, and I know what I'm saying is open warfare, I do get that. It's not what I want. I'm just pointing out that if China can defend their waters, then those are Chinese waters. Or do you agree with that?
So, it's an interesting concept. Traditionally, the territorial waters have been 5 to 12 miles from the coastline of a country. And that 5 to 12 miles perimeter was actually designated because it was the distance you could fire a cannon. In other words, it's what was defensible. If you can defend it, then nobody else gets to be there. Yeah. The problem is EEZs are 200 kilometers out, which is much, much larger than the traditional territorial waters. And this creates problems because once you have 200 kilometer EEZs, then all of these EEZs start to bisect, trisect, quadrisect in the South China Sea. They quintersect. There 5 of them have clashed. And so that leads to overlapping EEZs that require mediation and negotiation. And the Chinese had agreed to this, and they were actually in the process. All of the Southeast Asian nations were in the process of negotiating their EEZs with each other according to the code of conduct that they were starting to flesh out. And it was all going along slowly, but well. And the US got involved, and it used the Philippines as a trigger to turn it into a spoiler, to turn that entire South China Sea into essentially a war zone. Why? Because, again, these are well-documented plans. The US understands that $5.3 trillion worth of trade passes through the South China Sea, most of it going to or from China. And 70% of China's fuel goes through the South China Sea. According to Rand, if there is a shooting war in the South China Sea, and it doesn't have to actually, the US doesn't have to win this war, it just has to have some kind of shooting war, then the Straits of Malacca and the entire South China Sea will be shut down for traffic. It will be completely shut down for trade. And if that happens, once again, according to Rand, this would create a 15 to 25% reduction in China's GDP, which they assumedly think that is enough to bring down the Chinese government.
Wow.
So this whole notion of creating conflict in the South China Sea was instigated by the United States by way of the Philippines, which it used as a proxy. It actually paid for, it arranged for the entire, quote unquote, fake mediation at the Hague, which is a private tribunal. It was bought and paid for by the United States. It was arranged by CSIS, by the white shoe law firm U.S. law firm working for CSIS. And then they created this, fraudulent case where they say, well, China, lost its EEZ case. Completely fraudulent. First, you don't do mediation until both parties agree to it. There's no such thing as forced arbitration under UN clause. And China, like 30 other countries, said, we do not agree to forced arbitration around territorial claims. So that's very clear. But the US forced that arbitration through anyway. China refused to show up for the arbitral tribunal, and the US said the fact that you didn't show up shows us that we have to arbitrate because there's a difference of opinion. It's like the no-fault divorce of international law. The fact that
the very premise is absurd.
It's very absurd. But anyway, China didn't show up to the arbitral tribunal, and they never presented a defense. And so the US, or in particular Anglo hotshot lawyer, he presented both the case and its counter argument on behalf of China. And then guess what? They won the arbitration. Okay, they won the arbitration, and they said, China has no rights to the South China Sea. The problem is the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea does not get to decide who owns which land territory, because it's precisely about that. It's about ocean territory. It is not about land territory. And in international law, land territory determines what your ocean territory is. So you don't get to decide. An ocean convention does not get to decide, whether the Philippines belongs to the U.S. or Japan or Spain. Right. It's outside of its bounds. So, but it was very, very cleverly engineered. It's one of the, in terms of sheer deviousness, it's very, very cleverly engineered. Yes.
Hey, Jay, how is this? I guess I don't know why why would that ever be accepted? Like if I needed, say for example, if I wanted, I want your car. I need a car. And I say, I am holding a hearing on June 5th to discuss getting access to your car. And you say, you're a stupid idiot. This is my car. I'm not negotiating with you over something that you have the judge, you have the jury, you've effectively rigged what seems as a veneer of a process, but you're the one that's running the process. So no, I'm not going to show up.
This is exactly China's position. They say we don't show up and we don't accept the arbitration. Okay?
Right. So that's what I mean. It makes no sense. Like, why would it ever be accepted?
Because So I mean, this is a bought and paid for tribunal. It is not an international court. It is a private court that you can rent. It just happens to have an office in The Hague. But the US, having won the case, then ran with it in the Western media saying, China has refused to comply with the ruling of this, UN tribunal. It's not UN. It has nothing to do with the UN. It's not an international tribunal. It's a rent-a-court. They're rent-a lawyers working for a rent-a-court, and they claim they won in it. But it was a propaganda coup. Okay. Now, the analogy of the car is very, very apt, because the Chinese claim that they have had this car for generations, that they've had this car for thousands of years. It's a family car. And what the Filipino or the US lawyers said, it's a very clever argument. It's like they took the car and they said, look, let's look at these tires. There's air in the tires. Now, who does the air belong to?
Oh, wow.
Belongs to everybody. So it can't be Chinese. Let's look at the tires. Well, these tires are recycled from another car. Therefore, the tires can't belong to China. And then let's look at every single part. And they did that with every single part. And having dissected the car into, 1,000 different parts and saying, nobody owns any one of these single parts. Therefore, the car belongs to nobody. Therefore, we own the car because we found the car on our driveway. Therefore, it's our car. That was the argument, by analogy, that the U.S. CSIS made in court. And then they, once having, quote, won that judgment, they claimed, look, we won the judgment. The Chinese are breaking the law. And therefore, anything that we do in the South China Sea, including resupplying, a ship that is squatted on these shoals, is legitimate. If China tries to prevent us from doing that, it is breaking international law. It's not, but it's breaking international law. It is the offender. And therefore, we can go to war against this. And Anthony Blinken actually made this threat. He said, if something happens to Filipino ships, we see it as an infringement on our mutual defense treaty, et cetera, et cetera. So it's incredible. It's a setup. It's a setup based on a tiny, tiny premise. But this is how the U.S. wages war. I mean, this is a very skilled propaganda operation.
Yeah, but see, for me, it goes back to the original assessment. You own it if you can defend it. Like, I don't care. Meaning, look, I don't care what they say. Meaning, if I'm Iran, if I am a sovereign nation, I don't care. They can come up with any propaganda exercise that they want, and they can sell it to their other Western audience. As I keep pointing out, China, Russia, Iran, you guys they are never going to get an honest reporting. If Russia cures cancer, they're going to write a dirty headline about them curing cancer. So if I am one of these governments, I don't care. That's the position that I'm in. That's the position that I thought Iran should have been in. That's the position I thought Russia should have been in. If I can never get a positive headline out of a Western paper because they're being dishonest and they're effectively working at the behest of the government, then why am I trying to do so? I need to be able to defend my territory. That's it. If the Philippines is claiming territory that belongs to me, I will try to negotiate in good faith. I will try to come up with a resolution that doesn't involve military force. But at the end of the day, I preserve the right to defend my territory. And again, if I can defend it, it's mine. That's the way I look at it. That may be a hard-ass position. I'm an American, right? And so
it's a realist position, Jamal.
Yes,
idea that might makes right? And
I don't want to say that. I don't want to go that far. But if it's, I don't want to go that far because that can be used to justify pretty much any military activity, right?
Right. So we're on this a slippery slope right here.
Yes.
But, there's a part of me that, I would say many people would agree with you. I mean, perhaps even in Chinese culture, if you look at the Chinese character for country, it is essentially a boundary. It's a square boundary with a mouth and a spear. In other words, if you can defend the mouths, in your boundary with spears, with military force, you have a country. If you don't have that, right, you have nothing. Okay. Right. So I do think there is a kind of realist conception that you have to be able to back up your claims with force. Now, the thing is that the South China Sea is claimed by 5 parts of the South China Sea has claimants from 5 different countries. The EEZs lap over 3, 4, 5 times. And so it's not simply a matter of saying we're going to take this, because then everybody else will bandwagon against you. You really need to find a way to negotiate with everybody. And ultimately, I mean, this is my opinion, the entire regime of EEZs and the UN clause needs to be re-examined and to be brought back under control, because it really has been a way for the colonial powers to claim vast amounts of ocean territory so that it can control ocean choke points and therefore continue to dominate the world. So I think that has to be done as part of systemic decolonization that is, 500 years overdue. That has to be re-examined. And in the meantime, I think the best that you can do is negotiate with the parties on a amicable basis. China, the worst thing that China has done is spray water at Filipino ships, trying to resupply a ship that is squatting, a Filipino warship that's squatting, the shoals. But, I mean, if China were to go the way of Indonesia, Indonesia has fired on and sunk 500 ships from other countries.
Have they? So they're serious about. I mean, look, I did say negotiate in good faith.
Yes,
but if that fails.
Indonesia doesn't bother to negotiate. It fires on them, takes them over, and sets them on fire. It's
what
over 500.
What?
Yes, and everybody gets in a tizzy if China sprays water, but Indonesia
has been firing, taking, and burning down ships.
500.
They are not messing around.
They're not messing around. The thing is that territorial, when countries start to fight over ocean territory, it gets really intense. It's like a hockey game. People who expect this to be, a genteel board game are misguided. Once you get in the ocean, countries ram each other. It's like a hockey game, and even European states have gone to war with each other over abutting ocean territory. You have the Cod Wars and things like that. The Scandinavians and the British and the Europeans, they've all fought with each other in the past decades, fired on each other over the past decades over fishing rights in contested territories. So compared to that, China has been an absolute, Boy Scout in the South China Sea, despite occupation. But this is not what you hear in the Western press. China's threatening everybody. No, it's been trying to negotiate with everybody. In fact, China, that's the Chinese want to negotiate because they see that this is the only way forward.
KJ, that is a fantastic breakdown. There are times where I can just sit here and listen and learn. This is one of those times. That is fascinating. That is fascinating. The U.S. plays spoiler and they look for fault lines. That's why I asked, what's the fault line? What's the thing that they're using to drive that wedge? And that seems to be what it is, either Taiwan or either the sea or either in the Ukraine's case, we're knocking over the government. That seems to be our actions.
They're very good at it. They're experts at it, and they're experts at the PR and the propaganda around it once they've triggered. It's all about creating division and emphasizing, quote, identity politics, creating divide and conquer, and they're getting different parties to fight. And then once they're fighting, sitting back and swooping in when it's convenient. So this is the strategy of empire. And of course, if countries shouldn't be, shouldn't fall prey to that. And of course, countries that are subject to that should really consider, whether their comprador governments have any legitimacy. This is the problem. So very briefly, you asked about the Philippines, about Japan. Japan, as I've said before, they're unrepentant militarists from 1945. The US put them in, the CIA put them into power. It was a consortium of the Yakuza, the gangsters, the militarists, and the corporations that's what runs Japan right now. Right now, the LDP, the ruling party, is facing trouble. It's going to face some serious trouble. So, once again, the center seems not to be able to hold. Just as Korea, it seems like there's some turbulence happening there. We'll see what happens. But Japan has been strongly a U.S. quisling for the longest time. Go ahead.
Well, the prime minister just stepped down in Japan, and the ruling party just lost. Yeah, I could have swore I saw the report that say he just stepped down.
Okay, I'm probably, you're ahead of me on that piece. But if that's the case, that will be very, very interesting. Yes, I heard, there is the right-wing party which is gaining ground against the traditional ruling LDP.
So right here, Japan PM said he'll quit as soon as this month. 10 hours ago, Bloomberg, embattled Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is set to announce his intention to resign as soon as this month.
Okay, so yes. So you're right. The LDP has just lost. And so that is a big tectonic shift in Japan, just as Korea was a big tectonic shift. Although Ishiba was a very, very interesting character. He was actually a good representative of the Japanese militaristic agenda, because he said to the United States, it's fine, you can have bases on our country. We welcome US bases on our country. But in terms of reciprocity, we should also get to have Japanese bases on US soil.
Oh, that would never happen. We do not allow other military bases on our soil.
Okay, but that's what he said. Okay, so anyway, there is some interesting turbulence happening in Japan.
Yeah.
And of course, Korea, is in contestation right now. We'll see what happens. But also Australia is in play. Australia will be a key, force multiplier. These military exercises right now, Talisman Sabre, are happening in Australia right now. So we'll see. Australia's making, schizophrenic statements. It's reaching out to China. Albanese was in China, making nice at the same time that the Australian deep state and the Australian press are shrieking and shouting about the China threat. Yes. And
well, I was going to say, see, this gives me a hint that maybe these governments are not as consistent as they may seem on the surface. I could be wrong. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I mean, well, I hope that they're not as consistent and they're not as in lockstep.
There's always conflict. Quislings need. Quislings are divided. It's never that neat and clean, because the people don't want what their quisling leaders want.
Right.
And so then there are different, ways of contesting and conflicts. But, the historical record shows that Australia has always done what the United States wanted it to do. And when they haven't done it, the US has couped their government. Gough Whitlam was couped. Kevin Rudd was couped. Kevin Rudd is now, the ambassador. And now he's gotten back on the saddle, and he's making all the sounds that the US wants him to say. So it's the quisling governments that are following the dictates of the empire. They've been groomed, or they've been beaten into submission. The beatings will continue until the morale, the attitude
improves. Right. KJ, thank you for this. This was a fantastic breakdown. Honestly, it was. Teacher is correct. Teacher is correct. Teacher is in session. KJ No, he is a journalist, political analyst, writer, and teacher specializing in the geopolitics of the Asia-Pacific region, contributor to the book Capitalism on a Ventilator. You can get it at iacenter.org. You can also check out KJ on Breakthrough News Network. Check out his latest with Brian Beletic. I would imagine that is a good one. Brian is a fantastic guest. Thank you for this, KJ.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
You have a good one, man. Be safe. All right. We have come to the end. I've kept KJ way too long. I didn't want to interrupt him as he was breaking it down, because it's just fascinating to know. 200th show. It's in the history books. We've come to the end. We had a fantastic show. And let's go to the chats. Wow, we have a few. I'm going to say thank you right off the bat. I haven't even read them yet. You could be saying, Jamal, you're an asshole on all of these. You guys make the show what it is. And like I said, the show is often demonetized. You have to take the pressure off of that in your support for the show, whether it's buy me a coffee, whether it's PayPal, super chats, memberships, Patreon. All of these things are part of the things that help. So I see the number and I want to thank you for it. Wandy USA, happy 200th episode. Good morning, everybody. Well, thank you for that, Wandy. Diane Thomas, Mama Thomas. Jamal, congratulations on your 200th show. I have learned a lot with you doing your show. I wish you so many more shows. Congrats again. Have you heard anything else about Laith? Thank you for that, Mama Thomas. And yes, Laith is doing well. He said he's physically well. He said he was going to make a statement in a few days. He's going to rest. It sounded like it was a trying ordeal, especially being in this kind of limbo. He pointed out that he thought that this was more political than anything else. So we await his statement. Alexander G, thanks, Diane. We appreciate you. I appreciate Mama Thomas too. And R, congrats on the 200th show. Good work. Oh, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I try my best. I do my damnedest. Christopher Newton asking G. Maxwell to testify his levels of, quote, we investigated ourselves and we think we're innocent, unquote. That shouldn't even be possible. The president can give whoever he wants a pardon, even if it's somebody who ostensibly could potentially implicate him in crimes. And you can imagine the conversation, hey, we would like you to, air some of the Johns, providing one of those names is not on that list. Oh yeah, I could do that. You're gonna let me out of prison? I'm in prison for 20 years. You're gonna let me out? Yeah, I could do that. Trump? Who's Trump? I don't know a Trump. I've never met Trump in my life. Never met him in my life. Alexander G, we're proud of you, buddy. Diane is good company. Thanks for the work. Alexander, thank you for that. Honestly. Thank you for bringing on the Oracle from Matrix. Very interesting. What? Thank you for, you know, Margaret Kimberly. Get the fuck out of here. Margaret Kimberly is awesome. Margaret Kimberly is fantastic. Diana Panilocus, super sticker. Thank you, Diana. Thank you for that. Wanda USA. See, that is why I believe we were politically captured. Capitalism really isn't the name of our game. No. Look, the reality of it is, if you and I are playing a game, I can be very unscrupulous in the game and yet play by the rules if the rules are to my benefit. So I could say, this is the game. And for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, I could play the game honestly because the rules are in my interests. I have the advantage in that game. But let the rules no longer be in my interests. That is when you see whether the person is honest. Meaning if you're looking at Democrats and they say, hey, we're together, we're united, we're working, you may be further to the left, but hey, we're pushing on the same side. Okay, they can say that as long as every person who's running is some kind of robot that is, third-way Democrats that effectively minor Republicans. Let a real lefty get in and get into a position where they can win. That's when you see whether they're honest and whether or not we're really together. And from my point of view, that doesn't exist. I don't think the togetherness thing exists, not in the way that we function currently. And so, yeah, we can say we're capitalists up to the point where capitalism is not in our best interest in regards to another country. Changes overnight. It's cynical, but tell me how I'm wrong. How am I wrong? Paul Green, Dennis, one nation under blackmail on full display here. Yeah, that's what the Epstein thing does look like, doesn't it? Auntie Ann, do you think Deep State be angling to get JD Vance in as POTUS? Seems like maybe so. Understand Palantir created Vance and funded his career. You are absolutely right about Palantir funding his career. Would they want JD Vance in? Probably. Can they wait for him? Yes. I mean, JD Vance is young. If Trump could drop dead, right? And Vance will be VP. But JD Vance could also win in the next presidential election, providing Trump doesn't stink it up too much. So Vance could win. It's not like Democrats have massive opposition right now against even Trump, who, again, is stinking it up. So you can wait for him for 3 years. You can wait for him. You know, it's not like, meaning, I hope you get my point. There's no rush. Vance, Trump can't run again. So by definition, Vance will most likely be the person who's going to get the nod for the Republican presidential race when it comes up. Waiting 3 years is nothing. So, Auntie Ann, you might be right that they're trying to ding Trump up now. People who are trying to get rid of Trump, though, are Democrats, and they're using Epstein thing. And to be honest, this is a cell phone. Donald Trump was friends with Epstein forever. How on earth are you going to make this argument that we're going to release the files? We're going to release the files knowing you were friends with the guy for 20, 30 years. CT Super Sticker. Thank you, CT. Thank you for that. Let's see. Twisted Reality. Congratulations on number 200. Here's to many more. From your mouth to God's ears. From your mouth to God's ears. My health just needs to hold up. Frank Friel. Whoa, do you think the Ukrainians protesters actually were? How many protesters were actually out there? So the reporting is that there were a few thousand or several thousand that were out there. The question is whether the number grows. And to be honest, even if there were 500, if there's just 1,000, the media is going to run with it saying, oh my God, look at all of these people out here protesting Zelensky, meaning you make a story out of it just by virtue of it being there. But there were several thousand that were out there. I don't know the exact number. Sparky, assuming from growing up in Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard can play golf, though not ideal, wouldn't it be a good idea for her to replace Lindsey Graham, evil man, as President Donald Trump's golfing buddy? Maybe. I mean, I don't get the sense that they were on the same page. If you remember, Tulsi Gabbard was on the outs. They were talking bad about her. Trump was trashing her left and right. So maybe if she can worm her way into the golfing buddy, maybe they'd be on better terms. Death Dealer. Great show as always. Thank you, Death Dealer. It's not always, but I try my best. Foment Dissident, happy 200th. Well, thank you for that. Besides the Q, what other supernatural being do you think was the coolest or interesting supernatural being? Well, Guinan was definitely cool, but none of them were supernatural. Like, if it's happening, it's natural, right? I mean, supernatural doesn't exist. It's just what we're familiar with. In Q's case, they weren't gods. They just had a mastery of technology and reality that allowed them to be on some other plane of existence. They were able to interact with our plane. We saw it as supernatural just because they had the capability of functioning on multiple planes. Guinan is super interesting. Her ability to be aware of time is fascinating in a series. I mean, if you remember when the ship switched over to a wrong timeline, Guinan knew that the timeline was wrong. She knew that Tasha Yar was supposed to be dead. She knew all of that stuff. And it's like, okay, how do you know that? How do you know that? How do you have cosmic awareness, right? That's what we're talking about, cosmic awareness, where you're even aware of alternate timelines. How are you aware of an alternate timeline, right? If something changes your timeline, then that is the timeline that you know. Even if you think you have, deja vu of something, okay, you're still experiencing that in the context of your own timeline. It's the only thing that you know. You have no memory of anything else because your memory goes only in the sense of what happened. Guinan's sense, even if it wasn't memory, her sense was awareness of these alternate spaces. That is fascinating. Oh, that is fascinating. That is fascinating. So yeah, that will be probably my person. I can't think of anybody else. Wormhole aliens were interesting, but they were more muted. Again, the different reality space, but they have powers. There was this great speech where he's like, if you want to play gods, then be gods, that Cisco gave. Like, effectively, it's like, you're playing this role, and yet you're acting like you're not playing this role. If you're going to play this role, play this role. Here's a moment for you to do it. If you're going to act like gods, be gods. Oh, that was such a great speech. Such a great speech. Deep Space Nine was so good. It was so, so good. I think I got all of them. Yeah. All right. We have come to the end. Yes, Laith is doing well. He is out. He is safe. He said he's going to make a statement. I don't know exactly what happened or went on with him. I suppose he's going to say it in a statement. He did thank me for backing him, which, of course, I mean, dude, you're a guest on my show. I have a soft space for people who are guests on my show. Not to mention, I think it was probably more political than anything else. I mean, for fuck's sake. Hey, you don't have the paperwork. Okay, get out of here. You can't go in. But instead of you don't have the paperwork, you can't come in, it was you're coming with us. It's like, whoa, what do you mean I'm coming with you? What do you mean I'm coming with you? Like, if I'm trying to get into a club and they're like, we need to see your ID. Well, I don't have my ID. Okay, well, you can't get into the club. Okay, I get that part. But for the bouncer to say, you're coming with us. What do you mean I'm coming with you? What do you mean? What the hell are you talking about? Like, that stuff is terrifying, right? Yeah, this is terrifying. Is Laith authorized to keep having interviews? Yes, he can come on the show. The issue was he didn't have his certification as a journalist in Lebanon. And because he didn't have the certification as a journalist in Lebanon, he wasn't allowed to go into certain areas. Heidi did have a certification, or at the very least, Heidi is Lebanese, so it wasn't an issue with him, but it was an issue with Laith. And criticizing the Lebanese government, I imagine, didn't go across all that well. Like, imagine me doing a show and I'm trashing Malaysia. Well, that's not going to go over well. That's not going to go over well. I had a conversation with a guy from Malaysia. This was, I think, last year. And he said, the Malaysian government will show up if you're criticizing the government, like they send the police or something. He's like, why are you trashing the president? Don't you know the president is doing the best that he can for you? I was like, there's no fucking way. He says, yes. He said his friends that they've done that to, they will do that. So you can imagine if you're Laith and you have criticism, legit criticism, by the way. And as Heidi pointed out, it was like you have Wahhabis in the West raiding, or at the very least threatening to raid, basically, you know, these Jelani dogs, these filthy animals that are talking about attacking Lebanon. You have other filthy animals in Israel that are bombing your territory, and you decide not fire a bullet in anger at the people who are invading and blowing stuff up, but you go after Laith for complaining about it. Just saying. Just saying. Oh, we have one more. Let's see, what's this one? Arthur Fletcher, super sticker. Thank you, Arthur Fletcher. Thank you. All right, guys, this 200th show is going into the history books. I want to thank all of you. No one gets in. Lots of bash victims for wanting a night out. Yep. Press is not exempt from being a lying bar steward. No, the press is not. Oftentimes the press are liars. I suppose if we follow the offense, it's the best form of defense doctrine. Typically, yeah. Well, kind of depends. I mean, depends on what you're doing. If you're playing blitz, your opponent is a few seconds, then yeah, offense is better. You have to think shit out when you're trying to defend stuff. You don't fall into a trap. By the same token, if you have time, you can build up a powerful defense. You can let them effectively die on your defense. Situational, it's all positional. All right, I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to thank all of you that contribute to the show, whether you like, share it, watch it, any of those things, you have my deepest appreciation. 200 in the history books. Let's try to do 200 more. And hopefully by the other 200, we would have hit 100,000. And you would see a little thing on my wall saying you've hit 100,000. That is my objective. That is my goal. That is my Szechuan sauce. Have a good one all. Be safe. And thank you for joining. I'll see you tomorrow morning.